Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Deepest Lore. We are reviewing Adam Curtis once more. Comrade Roberts, how are you doing this week?
Oh, I'm good. I'm very happy to be here this fine lunchtime. Interesting developments, obviously. As a certain person was away for the previous two episodes, I've leveraged a certain bit of the power faction, the Presidium, to bring Panama Hat on side and bolster my power base. So I think Horus is going to find it a bit challenging in the future. The right deviationists are going to be under a bit more pressure from now on.
We're calling him Iron Panama Hat. Iron Hat.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. I'm here to steer the panel in a more Pol Potist direction.
Comrade Karin, how you doing? You still editing Pravda?
Pol Pot was a Maoist, though, wasn't he? He didn't really derive his stuff from like Leninism. Well, I suppose except that Mao did as well. But.
I mean, to be honest, I think Pol Pot was just Pol Pot. I don't think he. Yeah. I think he just kind of did whatever he wanted. I don't think he really paid much attention to socialist orthodoxy.
I think Bowden just described him as a cretin. Just had a cretinous understanding of Marxism, and that was it. Really.
He had a very literal way of putting everything into action, because as Bowden points out, he would sit in a French salon, and someone like Sartre would come up with a kind of windy French aphorism like the family is a gun in the hands of the bourgeois state, and Pol Pot would go, "Oh, abolish the family."
Yeah.
And so he tried to do that,
But yeah, I'm now up against two ex-libertarians and one guy who doesn't really give a shit either way, and this just makes me more like I never used to really care. I used to just keep quiet about being libertarian, but now this made me sort of want to own it. What's the word? Like visibility. I want visibility.
But is it harder to go up against me, who knows my Mises and Rothbard and so on? It's like you're a wrestler, but I know all the counter holds. I know all the holds and the counter holds. Is that more difficult?
But you have kind of forgotten it, haven't you?
I haven't. I haven't forgotten any of it.
We're going to turn these streams.
You're getting rusty, old man.
2-hour-long struggle sessions in which we will find a way to kill the inner liberal inside Horus. We will finally destroy the last of it.
I'll remind you three that we have got a documentary to watch here, and that I am focused on the task. So
very good.
Can I just come back to Pol Pot a second? Wasn't he famously influenced by Sartre and French existentialism?
Yes.
Yeah.
And people like Julie Kristeva and people like
that. The problem is, I think that gives him a little bit too much credit in that when you say influenced by, it was more that he went to the salons in sort of 50s, 60s France and sort of hung around them. I don't know how much of the actual philosophy he took in. He basically just decided that you had to do armed struggle and then went kind of absolutely insane with it, herding people into fields for wearing glasses and this type of thing.
Their regime was racist as well. They murdered people sometimes on the basis of being from other ethnic groups.
Yes.
They would raid into Vietnam. I know that. That's why Vietnam invaded Cambodia in the end. Because they just kept sorting into, I don't know whether it was coming right from the top or what, but they just kept launching raids into Vietnam, apparently in the Mekong Delta, and just murdering 50 people at a time and then just withdrawing. No idea why. But it's some people say it was racial hatred.
It was very
Is it
racist.
true that Pol Pot ordered the Khmer Rouge to round up people who wore glasses on suspicion of being intellectuals?
It was he had this vision of an ideal agrarian society that in order to achieve it, you had to start again from step one. And in order to start again, you had to get rid of all prize. That was partly why he tapped into the kind of racial thing, because people from that part of the world are very, very racialist in general. They've got a lot of beef with their neighbors. And his idea was, well, if we just get people who are only ethnically Khmer, we get no one who's ever read any literature, no one who knows anything about art or religion. We just get down to this core of kind of pure peasantry. Then we can begin to do socialism type thing.
So you wipe out the middle class,
and just get rid of anyone that lived in towns, who drove cars or anything like that. You just want the agrarian sector. Although later on, when he was living in exile, giving sort of random interviews to the press, he claimed that this was not his idea. That basically his lieutenants and his kind of middlemen and his radical students got carried away and took his orders too literally. So that's why they went around shooting anyone that had a pair of glasses or a wristwatch on. Because they, that he must be an intellectual. He's got all these modern.
Yeah, in other words, Pol Pot developed a chud problem.
I think so. Yes, and there's a very wonderful clip later on in an interview where he's kind of sat on this veranda somewhere, sort of very nice looking, and he just says to the interviewer, "Look, am I a violent person? No, I'm not." It's very kind of Blairite rhetoric.
I think people realise that I'm a pretty straight sort of guy,
Yeah.
I think the real trouble in town at the moment is I noticed this story this morning that Ocado is in trouble. That Shergar butter deliveries are going to be very affected. They can't capitalize their automation. Apparently,
I only used Ocado during COVID, so that's probably why, right?
Yeah.
I mean, did anybody still get their shopping delivered?
No, never did.
I only did it during COVID. Although I've been considering going back because I don't know if you've been shocked. It's a real ordeal to go to Sainsbury's now. It's a real pain in the ass. And I only got stuff for a roast, stuff for my peasant soup, stuff for my Marco Pierre white spag bol, came to 105 quid. It took me bloody ages. Such an ordeal. And
quote peasant soup.
There wasn't, yeah, that's a Marco Pierre white Nor special as well. But it took me like an hour, came to 105 quid. I only had like 3 bags of shopping, and they didn't have a single till on. So I then had to run the entire trolley through myself. And then every other item is like, double check it. It's not really designed to take like one bit of ginger or something like that. So I guess, then I have to call over old, Mrs. Patel or whatever. Oh, God's sake, it's such a pain.
Well,
I hate it.
Your mistake is going to Sainsbury's, not Waitrose. I guarantee you wouldn't have this problem in John Lewis. It's nicer.
I have no. What is £105 normal? Is that considered? To me, that's insanely expensive. Is that how much is your shopping?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I bought some very basic things recently just to make a spag bol, and it was about 20 quid, which surprised me. It was a handful of things. I only shop for one.
And I was like, what's the offending item, right? What's the offending item? I bought a whole chicken. I mean, granted, it was organic. 14 quid for a chicken.
Yeah.
14 quid!
Yeah.
You must be having a laugh. Oi, Sainsbury's, no! But anyway, yeah.
I can see you complaining that the grissini aren't fresh, stuff like that, snapping them in a fury.
Yeah. And then I made a curry the next day. I had a whole week of things planned out, and I'm still in that week. So tonight I'm going to make my signature spag bol. Anyway, before we get going here, speaking of heels, believe it or not, you're not the biggest heel to come on this channel.
Oh.
There is another friend of mine, a friend of ours, in fact, who is what they call in pro wrestling a heat magnet. Okay. Now, the thing is, I know the art, and I want to show you character. I think you might find this interesting, actually, Hat.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the Welsh wrestler Adrian Street?
Adrian Street. Yes, I have. The name rings a bell.
Now,
yes, I know this person.
Here, Adrian Street, actually in an actual Welsh mining, like he went to a pit dressed like that in the early 70s. Can you imagine the heat Adrian Street used to get back in those days?
Yeah, because wasn't his whole shtick that he'd act up really camp and sort of get like, you know, this sort of hated gay character?
Yeah,
and that was the whole idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he actually, like, to talk about heel heat, he dressed like that, and then, you know, you go to these, like, and they were properly rough working towns. They used to work back then. In London, I think it was York Hall. You know, but some of the venues in Wales were like, you know, they only held like 200 and stuff. It would be like a pool hall, right? You could genuinely, they could get into fights and things.
Well, it was rough, wasn't it?
He'd go to those settings like that, but then he'd bring his wife to the ring with him, and then he'd beat up his wife as well. So it was like cross-dressing plus domestic abuse. Can you imagine? Like, he used to cause riots.
I mean, that is beautiful heel work, though, isn't it?
Average life in the Tory shires.
Yeah. Absolutely beautiful heel work, right?
Do you mind bringing up that last picture again? I just want to point something out there.
This one?
The other one that with just the two of them. Well, actually, you can see it here as well. But do you notice how this coal miner who's wearing what looks like a tweed jacket and a cravat to go down the mine? Yeah. I mean, look at how high the standards were back then.
Slightly Starmerish face as well.
And here's another one of Adrian Street. So this was there's a long line. I mean, more modern fans will remember Gold Dust, of course, and in the 80s there was adorable Adrian Adonis as well. But it's always been like the easiest way to generate heat. Here's adorable Adrian. There you go. There was Adrian Adonis. He was actually given that gimmick as a punishment from Vince McMahon for putting on weight. You know, Vince was a big.
Sorry, what was that manager called? Was Jimmy something?
The Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. Yeah, the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. Yeah.
He always had a loud halo with him, didn't he?
But anyway, I've been around the internet a fair old bit, and obviously everybody knows Evelyn comes on this channel. But recently they had an appearance, and I couldn't help but notice there was quadruple the number of outside visits on the video. And I was looking at the other analytics. You know, YouTube's pretty good. I rarely look at them, but they break down analytics and they show you how long each person watches each video. And their appearance actually had an above average viewer duration, which is ironic given that half the comments were "I'm not watching." Okay. But then the other thing that you can do on YouTube is you can actually just go in and see how many comments people have left in the history of the channel. Now, this channel's been around for 10 years, so lots of people who've watched for a long time have got hundreds and hundreds of comments, or they've got 50 odd comments. But there were an unusual amount of people who had just a single comment. So then I kind of went down a little rabbit hole, and I was like, well, where are all these people coming from then? And it turns out there's it's an obscure bit of YouTube where you can actually see where they came from. So I traced back to the source. I thought, well, this is an old-fashioned raid. Where do they come from? And lo and behold, I had a look. Discord.com, Telegram, but this one was interesting to me. GamerUprising.to. Now, what do you think you find if you go to GamerUprising.to? So yeah, that was very interesting indeed. So yeah, you cannot pull one over on me. I will expose it using weaponized autism every day of the week.
Why are the people at Gamer Uprising interfering?
Well, if you go to that site, it turns out it's run by Andrew Anglin.
Okay.
And yeah, it seems like somebody organized like an old fay. Oh, that'll show him. Let's turn up to this video and be like, did you know? You're talking to a truth. I'm like, yeah, we've known for years. What can we do about it? It's just like fucking hell.
I think you've been disagreeing a bit with Scrump and Evelyn about the 4chan thing. I side with you on that one. I mean, I disagree with them
I disagree with them on that. I thought they were too, and I'm not having a go at them, but I think they were too defensive on that. And I think people who came up through Poll and came up through 4chan need to stop being defensive of that and wake up to the possibility that they were psyoped by Jeffrey Epstein and friends.
I think Poll was. I mean, there's no doubt that it was used by various people, like because you could just post completely anonymously. Well, I think it might be visible. Your IP might be visible to the site or something, but Poll was like properly anonymous and quite anarchic. Although it was censored as well. I remember at Gamergate, which is 12 years ago now, there was a controversy then. Like loads of people, I think before Gamergate, loads of people had already moved over to 8chan and WizardChan. Like there was alternatives. Because 4chan had already become censorious, and especially during Gamergate, they nailed their colours to like the pro, what's her name, Zoe Quinn side, quite blatantly. But like, I think the guy who runs, what was his name, Moot, and I think some of the people on there are like, I don't know what, operatives of something. Because 4chan seems to be used, but it's like a place where you can do psyops, right? Like where just ordinary people like us can do psyops as well, but of course, people working for Epstein or all sorts of people could do stuff on there for sure.
Here's something I find very interesting, Horace. Right, I used to listen to Caribbean Rhythms with Bronze Age Pervert. Okay, I used to listen to that on the regular. One of the things that BAP was always heavily against was people stopping being anons and using their real names and faces. Okay, he always wanted to keep it as an anon frog Twitter movement. Okay, in other words, recreating what was there on 4chan on Twitter, if that makes any sense, where it's anonymous, where it's nobody like it's all these anonymous tip-offs all the time. Nobody shows their real face, etc., etc. And also, he was very against real life events and real life organizing. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting, because basically, in pure elite theory terms, he's saying you must always remain the disorganized mass online. You must always remain basically ineffective, slot posters, right? He actively pushed that for many, many years. And I thought, that's interesting, because now we can see the BAP sphere basically pushed the exact same talking points as the views of Jeffrey Epstein in those files. And lo and behold, a whole bunch of them now are literally like glazing and running cover for Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, come on.
And BAP himself is a colleague of Edwin Luttwak, right? Who is a neocon. He is in the heart of the neocon think tanks and so on. BAP has done podcasts with him openly. I don't know if anyone's looked up Luttwak. I can't remember how it's spelled, but he's fairly old. He's a known academic and think tank guy and stuff, and policy guy, I think. But he is a neocon. He's a central neocon, right? And that's been openly done for years. I wonder if he's in the Epstein files or what. I don't know. But for BAP to become connected to him is perfectly plausible, I think.
So when I see organized outside interference on a stream with Scrump and Evelyn on, gets my head a scratching, because this is not happening because Evelyn's a troon, right? I mean, those guys have got well-known troon mates. In fact, they were involved in whole scandals for having troons in their magazines and stuff.
That was Raw Egg Nationalist magazine had a troon. Yeah.
This is happening simply because, in some strange way, they've got a feeling that those two are onto them. That's why it happens. So, I'm in the era of not giving a shit, Horace. This is like, to me, the Epstein files is like the red line. There's no going back after, if you've shown your ass over that, there's no going, once you've glazed pedo elites, there's no way back, in my view.
Fucking right. Absolutely
so
right.
This is it. So, that's just what I had to say on that. Before we get going here, I have to play an ad for my friend Eric Kaufman, and he is running a course from the University of Buckingham. I've been involved in this thing with him for a while, so I'm going to play that ad. I will remind people, pick up courses from the academic agency. We're going to play this ad. You guys can do your plugs, and then we'll get going on Curto.
The ideology of our universities and many other institutions can accurately be described as woke. Woke is not an epithet, but used properly describes the dominant cultural left belief system of Western institutions. Have you ever wondered how woke came about, who believes in it and why? Or how the culture war between woke and anti-woke forces is redefining society and politics? Well, there's good news. I've developed a 15-week online course on woke at the University of Buckingham, which is open to the global public, the first of its kind in the world. The course is not assessed, but is focused instead on deepening your understanding of woke. I offer a rigorous objective analysis of this phenomenon, similar to the way I would for fascism, communism, or any other ideology. I've studied the cultural left since the mid-1990s, and I'm ideally placed to help you understand woke. Sign up today using the attached link.
Yeah, I've had some interesting conversations with Eric. I mean, he is very big on the whole mind virus idea. Obviously, I'm like core elite theory, so we disagree a little bit on just how organized it all is. He gives more credence to the idea that ideas get into people's heads almost like viruses. But he's more open to elite theory than you might imagine. So we've had some very interesting conversations in the past. Just before we get going, guys, anything you want to promote, Hat?
No, not especially. You can find my channel. I'm sure everyone knows where that is, in my Twitter. But nothing special. No.
Horace?
Working on a new essay for my Substack that will take a while. The link to my Substack is below the video. My last one is still relevant in my opinion. It's about Richard Evans denying the focus and denying the certain lobby behind Churchill in the 30s. So if people want to see that, it's on my Substack.
And Robert?
No, nothing particular this week. I'm just looking forward to this particular episode. I encourage people before we came to the stream to go and have a look at it without us interrupting, because I had some comments previous from people who contact me, talking about us pausing. It's not that they're necessarily complaining. There's some people who enjoy us pausing it, but I think it's also worth remembering. You go away and watch these episodes without us doing that, because you can really appreciate the flow that Curtis gets into. And I thought this episode was particularly good, actually, after recent ones. When I watched it back again, I think it's got a really nice, mix of imagery and music.
A couple of things on that Eric Kaufman ad. I mean, a number of people say that his books are color coded. That is actually an extremely posh library in this building. I forget what it's not his. It's not like his house. It's this kind of special institute that they use, and it is one of the best libraries I've ever seen. If I can ever get you in there, you'll be in wonder. And they've got some pretty interesting books in there as well. So I don't know if the books are deliberately color coded, but there's a lot of very nice hardcovers in there that I don't like. They're not. I don't even know what the publishers are or what sort of editions those are. They're not like folio books. They're like proper pristine hardcover.
They might be privately printed. You can still have luxury editions made.
Yeah.
And whereabouts is that institute?
It's somewhere in London. I forget what it's called now.
Okay.
Prosperity or something like that. But yeah. And the other thing I'll say is that, people who've read his book White Shift say that, well, he's indifferent to replacement migration or whatnot. That has not been. I mean, I've met him a few times. He does not seem like someone who's indifferent to replacement migration. I'll just say that. Maybe his views have changed over the past 5, 6, 7 years. Maybe literally a decade of being handed by wokesters and left wingers and maybe hardened his views a little bit, but he is certainly not indifferent.
I read White Shift when it was new, and I did think he was sympathetic to the immigrants and to the people bringing them in, but he has definitely traveled a long way since then. I don't know where he's at now, but he got, as you say, hounded by the left after that book came out.
Well, just interestingly, the other night he was on a debate at Unheard. Who is it for? That they were hosting about should the right dump Trump, and he was on the side saying yes, we should.
Yes.
It's on YouTube. There's a bit of it on YouTube. Then they make you pay, but
there's a very good reason for that though as well, because another thing that people forget about Kaufman is that he's Canadian, which means he's seeing the effect of Trumpism on the European right and on the Canadian right, and he's like, this is a fucking disaster because it's it's putting back the project he's been involved with, anti-woke and all the rest of it, because it's strengthening the neoliberals everywhere else. So that's I haven't seen the debate, but I can imagine he was arguing along those lines. That was prior to the Epstein files coming out. Obviously, God knows what's going to happen. I can't believe that Howard Lutnick has not been fired yet. It's ridiculous. It's one of the few times this country has seemed less corrupt than another country. At least Mandelson got fired. So
Keir Starmer continues unabated.
All right. Shall we get going with Curso here? Anything else before we get going?
Nothing to add. I want to let this one flow a little bit, so I may not say necessarily too much in the first sequence here. I think it's quite strong, but just let's see what it does.
Okay, fantastic. Oh, I will address one more thing. This guy saying that my channel flits in between 126 and 127. Look, you've got to understand. I run network analysis. I know that there is a core group of people trying to target at the moment. But having done this about 6 times already, you know that a core group of activists is only ever about 500, 600, maybe a maximum 1,000. So what I'm trying to do is flush those people out, okay, which is going to create a little bit of turnover. So the reason it's flitting like that between 126 and 127 is because there's a certain amount of like chud clear out to flush out those people who are clearly working for this network that I mentioned. And I did it once before, and once you can see they're coming from this Telegram chat or this Discord or whatever, that there's only 300 real people or 500 real people or whatever. But once you've got them, they're gone. So that's basically what's happening there. I wouldn't worry about 126 or 127.
Yeah, just before we start, I just wanted to ask about the thumbnail. Are these like sexy red cards or something?
Well, this is just from like the opening sequence that we're about to watch here. So
it's from one of the shows that Jiang Qing promoted called The Red Detachment of Women, a sort of opera about basically it was about fighting the landlords in China. Up before Mao. But we'll see.
Well, the one on the right, I would. The one on the left, more doubtful.
I knew it was coming.
But the one on the right's got a certain something. She's got something. She's got like the one on the left's got a bit more of a plate face as well. But anyway, yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah.
Another
don't know. Is it too early to pause? Is this allowed, Simon?
No, go for it. Go for it.
Right, okay. I don't know if we're going to see those ladies again. They reminded me of, you know what Max Mosley got embarrassed for? I don't think he committed a crime. He tried to sue the papers or something. Do you remember? He hired some. He hired some, I don't know, bondage artists, let's say, and like their role was to be sexy Nazis in a concentration camp fantasy. And
just giving you ideas.
Yeah, I'm thinking I might set up like a Red Guard gulag type one. I don't know, but I'm not into bondage. So anyway, move on.
Can I just mention something? I haven't actually watched this Can't Get You Out of My Head before. This is I'm coming to it fresh. It's got a bad rep online. I actually think it's one of Curtis's better works. I mean, it's his best one for a long time, in my view.
Yeah, so there's more to it than, I mean, I originally hated it and I wouldn't watch it again when it originally came out, because it sort of started within the first few minutes. The British people were deeply racist, etc. And I thought, well, this is kind of queering the pitch, very quickly. And I let it go for a while. But having sort of looked into what he's looks like he's doing, to me, it has more interest in it, and he is using a lot of, let's say, triggering subjects, as we saw last week, the discussion about trans, but he's using that as a metaphor for societies in transition, as well as people reconstructing their bodies through capital, as capital is beginning to kind of, fail its populations, so there's all sorts of interesting images that he juxtaposes and all sorts of things that he's playing with. So I think there is a lot to it. There's actually a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, I just think it's beautiful that you've managed to kill the chud within, Simon. That was your kind of, chud instincts for 6 years ago, whatever. But you've developed and matured, as have we all. It's beautiful. It's beautiful to see.
Yeah. I think it's important to do that thing of not confusing what Curtis is doing on screen, the way he's telling stories and where he's going, with worrying about what he believes. As we've said before, yes, he probably is a sort of left liberal. He says he's slightly libertarian in some ways, and actually he says he doesn't know his political positions. He's often led by the material and the stories he's telling, and he starts with the archive. He doesn't really start with a thesis like someone like Jonathan Meades, who does a big essay and then films it. Curtis is kind of sort of being a bit emotional and responsive to what he's seeing, and then doing the digging later on to link it all together. So don't prejudge him on the basis of his subjects or his approaches. Well,
and he has that strong sense of that famous phrase, the treachery of images, doesn't he? Where he knows that the things you see, especially you see through the medium of something like film, is liable to be constructed and to want to spin a narrative to you. I think the most interesting thing to me about Curtis is how he takes those visual narratives and kind of respins them. He doesn't alter them. He shows you them directly, but all he has to do is say a few words on top of them, and it completely changes what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Horace, does it trigger you that Curtis calls himself a libertarian at all? Like when
I haven't. Only time I've ever heard him talking about his beliefs, he was on Chapo Trap House, which is like far left.
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't know he'd called him. But when lefties say libertarian, they generally mean like an anarcho-communist sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't think he's that.
But socialism.
It's not doctrinaire libertarianism. I think he's used the word in response in some interviews, saying, I've got a bit of a libertarian thing. He sort of, I think he's just really talking about a questing intellectual sense of freedom. And he believes this. I mean, one of his big themes about radical individualism comes back. His view on that is that can't be put back in the box. We have to kind of live with that, but we have to find some sort of approach to collectivity. And the recent discussions, you had on your channel about a sort of a post-ideological politics, post-left-right politics is perhaps where the future's coming. And in a sense, that's what Curtis is driving towards as well. He's not,
Let's be honest here. I mean, we were talking before we came on air, Horace, about both of us were born in 1982, right? To some extent, being born and brought up in that era, it's almost impossible not to have some degree of individualism and, like default libertarianism, to the extent where you don't want people interfering. You don't want to, in a way, you don't want to be part of the crowd. In a way, I am Belle from Beauty and the Beast or some bullshit, right? So where if I was in that provincial French town, I would be the weirdo reading books on the side. You know what I mean? And part of my journey is just recognizing that most people aren't like me, aren't like that. Like there are lots of people who you know desire to be peasantry or want guidance or want to be part of the crowd. Or you know, just before I came on air, I was watching this clip of Nick Fuentes hammering the TPUSA halftime show because they featured this chubby guy singing a country song about wanting to like go and fish and grill and so on. And I absolutely understand where he's coming from. And to that extent, that is him also saying like, yeah, I don't really want to be like that crowd because it's going to create like, do you know what I mean? And I don't know how to we can't get rid of that because that's who like, that's how we've been socialized.
I read that book, the Alan McFarlane book on the origins of English individualism. Has anybody read this? I get an M for McFarlane in the chat if anyone's read that. It was recommended by Ren, who some people probably don't like, but it was a good recommendation. It doesn't actually, right? So the title would suggest that the book explains why England in particular, and it really is England, you know, not France, not even Wales, is such an individualistic place in terms of, you know, attachment to private property and the right to just be left alone and all this stuff. And he traces it back to the 1200s, I think. He says, like, even back then, there was not, you know, as there is in almost all the rest of the world, there was not any rigid pattern or practice of fathers giving their farm or, you know, their holding or whatever to their oldest son or even to any of their children. That had already broken down by the 1200s in England, that there was like, you know, a great degree of choice about what you could do with your property. We're talking about land, the most hard to, you know, the most illiquid, one of the most illiquid properties, but it was relatively liquid in England already 800 years ago. And he says in the end of the book, he basically says, I can't explain this because the records don't go back far enough. But what I can say and what I've showed in this book is that since way before any sort of question of capitalism or anything like or the Jews or any, you know, anybody like seeding these poisonous neoliberal ideas, it's nothing like that. It's 800 years ago and more that the English has just become like this for some reason. Is it genetic? We don't know. Is it particularities of history? We don't know. But it has been the case for a long, long time. And you know, we are English people or partly English people, you know, whatever, like we're in the English tradition, and we are, of course, we understand the desire to be left alone. We don't have a great deal of faith in those who would tell us what to do, whoever they are, church, state, whatever. We don't dig them. We're not inclined to listen to them, and I think that's a good thing, and it's natural.
Yeah, and that's very much Curtis's emotional position when he discusses this in interviews. He says, you know, look, you don't have to give up your individualism. Okay, we saw Century of the Self, Freud, etc. Yes, it was a vector for selling stuff to you and then reconfiguring and packaging your politics. But you don't have to give up your individualism. You don't have to give up your mobile phone to go to Trumpton. But he is saying, but where can we find a new you know, collectivity that's going to work for us? You know, there's obviously the horror of things like the collective forms of dictatorships in the 20th century. But does it necessarily always end in that form? And as he challenges the left and says, until you, the left, come up with something as strong a narrative as nationalism, you're going to fail. So what can you find beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I always think there's something to say for the English or the British kind of eccentric. You know, I was showing those images of Adrian Street at the start, and there's still like, okay, he was different or whatever, but there was still this, how can I put it, like an inbuilt sense of actually it's all right to have a couple of weirdos, you know, within British society. And even if you go back and watch Trumpton, it's not like everybody in Trumpton is the same. There are eccentrics in that town as well, you know, and there are, and it's the difficulty is that British society always worked in a fairly organic way, where you didn't need the central controller saying, well, this is it has to be this way or it has to be that way, or it just kind of worked. It kind of people did they did it automatically. To use a Marxist phrase, it worked by itself, right? It worked by itself. And one of the issues, and I think one of the things that we brush up against and why people end up being libertarians, is that the modern state strips out anything that's organic, anything that's real, and they make it a health and safety thing, or they make it that they want to unify, make the rules uniform, and it seeps into every area of life. I've been listening to LBC. Labour are trying to shut down all these academies that Tony Blair opened, all of these kind of schools that do things differently, and they've had a war on private schools and things like that. And one of the call-ins that people like Ferrari and stuff keep on having is, look, why aren't you looking at what these schools do well? And when they bring on people from these schools, okay, I mean, one of the things they were talking about, right, in it is, should teachers have to be fully qualified, trained teachers? And private schools, public schools, are getting into trouble because they're employing people who don't have the right qualifications. Where this comes in is that, let's say you're doing, you're in year 9 or you're doing GCSEs, and your a teacher who's doing economics and maths and stuff with you is an international banker, or he's an investment consultant, or he doesn't want to go and train to be a teacher, but he knows his shit, right? He's an expert in his field. Or I don't know, like your drama teacher, was a hotshot director or something like that, didn't have the normal qualifications, and Labour and the managerial state just hate that idea because it doesn't fit the box. It's, you don't have the right qualification.
Credentialism, yeah.
You don't have the right credentials because you haven't been through teacher training like this 22-year-old woman straight out of university. And the public schools are saying, hold on a second, we've got this guy used to be, in the upper echelons of the Bank of England, and you're telling us he's not qualified. You understand this is the whole thing. And
it's
anyway,
also it's strikingly illogical because universities always have and always will. They'll spend huge amounts of money to get in people who are, great writers, great bankers, great scientists, great artists, whatever, to teach and to guest lecture. That's a big part of what makes great universities great. Is their ability to attract, talent from outside the academy to come and teach things. But below the age of 18, that's, it's not acceptable. You need to have, teachers who are, as you say, you need to have gone through this weird straitjacketing system. It doesn't make any sense. And also, this is backtracking slightly, but to Simon's point about the leftists not having a narrative as strong as nationalism. To my mind, I don't think there's any successful communist movement which hasn't basically been a nationalist movement at heart. Cuba, China,
or become
Vietnam,
one.
Russia.
That's the story of Stalin. Become one. Yeah.
But in a sense, the Bolsheviks partly began because people were dissatisfied with what had become, because Russia had been made weak through the course of the First World War. And there was a very strong nationalist element there to be, even to begin with, even more so in places like Cuba, where it was, we need to send the Yankees home effectively.
So it has to be overtly incorporated, yeah.
Castro didn't even mention socialism publicly, did he? Until quite a while after he'd taken over.
Yeah,
it was like
very careful with his optics.
It was like they were quite unspecific, I guess. They were just against Batista, corruption, and American domination, maybe. Or
yeah.
But just come back to this point, right? On that basis, where we all kind of agreed with what we were talking about, so we're all libertarians for us, right? Or in the way that Curtis might mean it as well, or you know what I mean? Like there is this default where we don't want these hard rules that fix things into these neat little boxes and this like pointless bureaucracy and stuff like that. The challenge is that, I mean, I've come to see that there have to be some sort of capital controls. I've come to see that there are people who need guidance and so on. So how do you get the sensible balance between allowing individuals to flourish at that level and allowing enough flexibility in the system to allow people who've got, like, people who've kind of got that X factor, but they don't, they may not tick all the right boxes. That sort of individual, which is what this country is built on, while also kind of curbing some of the excesses, I guess, of of kind of raw dog eat dog, oligarchic style, shock therapy style capitalism. You know what I mean? So
interesting question. Yeah, I'll have to answer it another time.
But I mean, not, maybe this is complicating things a bit, but I seem to remember from my kind of libertarian days, brief as they were, there was kind of this repeated refrain that the only reason you'd need to have the kind of shock therapy stuff and the kind of radical capitalist reform in the first place was because you'd already done something socialistic that had buggered it up.
Yeah.
I mean, like there's and I'm wondering, because the thing is, when I look back at what I know about economics, that does seem to be basically correct in the sense that if you start tinkering, even on perfectly rational kind of philanthropistic grounds, do you risk it just eventually always devolving into like 70s Britain, essentially? This is what I'm thinking. Again, I'm a bit worried now. I've gone onto the Bukharinite deviationist track.
You've opened up the schism,
Yeah. Thinking.
Does that put me outside the party? Have I been exiled? Am I?
Well, we didn't want to tell you out front, but
Trotsky wasn't the right deviation, was he? Trotsky was just Trotsky. Stalin just
Trotsky was the left deviation.
Yeah. He was.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, he wanted the world revolution. He wanted Stalin to invade Germany in 1927, I think.
Huh. But then, according to the Stalinists, started working for the Germans.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Jiang Qing, the widow of Mao Zedong, had been locked away in solitary confinement for 10 years.
Sorry to pause it again, but you see, it's obvious that you cannot run. Like, if you can imagine ideology as like an operating script or like a operating system, right? Like Windows or iOS or something like that. You could not run Chinese style OS on Britain. It just wouldn't work.
No.
You can't get British people to be uniform in this way and behave. And you know what I mean? It's just like, I mean, I think they've even done experiments on kids and things and being like, well, yeah, the thing is East Asian kids are way more docile and they just listen. Whereas,
virus spirit.
There's just something in kids in this country that's just, they're just not going to listen in the same way, and which is why so much of our education system in theory, or used to be, certainly when we were kids or us, was about questioning stuff, questioning sources, understanding, coming at the same thing 3 different ways. And, on this hand, but then on the same way on that hand. There's no one, you know what I mean? Like there was a lot of that sort of stuff when we were, and I think there's a reason for that. I think it's because British people are inquiring. They want to question the limits all the time. Yeah. For good or for bad. That's just what. So you have to develop something that's going to work with the people, not something that's going to work against the people. You know what I mean?
Exactly, and it's very pointed that they talk about the success of China as capitalism with Asian characteristics.
Absolutely.
That time she had hoarded socks and handkerchiefs until she had enough to make a rope.
Yeah, also bring back the cane. I agree with that guy. Bring back the cane. I agree with him.
Yeah.
Not that I was ever cane, but I probably should have been. Probably
measure.
Should have been. Wouldn't it be such an arrogant upstart?
And in 1991, she hanged herself. She left a note. It said, "Today, the revolution has been stolen by a clique led by Deng Xiaoping. The result is that unending evils have been unleashed on the Chinese people. Chairman, your student and fighter is coming to see you."
Pause, please. Very, very minor point, but in the foreground of that last shot, was that a cactus? Do they have cactuses in China? I never knew that. It looked like an agave plant or something. Or like,
well, in northern China on the border with Mongolia, they have a lot of desert type places, so it's possible it's a similar plant.
So Inner Mongolia.
Yeah, that kind of place.
I tell you what, Chinese Thomas the Tank doesn't hit different, doesn't it? I mean, what they do?
The trucks are kept in line.
Jiang Qing's great enemy, Deng
Pause.
Xiaoping, was now all-powerful.
But then Diesel comes in, he just takes over. Thomas is just retired immediately. That's
The new China he had created was growing rapidly, building vast factories to send goods.
Sorry, frivolous. Just continuing that thought. It wouldn't have had quite the same cachet as Thomas the Intercity 125, would it?
Thomas the Maglev.
that may have also broken the pause record. That was 3 very quick pauses in less than 10 seconds.
Rapid pauses.
To the west. He had got rid of all Jiang Qing's revolutionary dreams, but he had also smashed all visions of democracy by sending troops into Tiananmen Square. But Tiananmen Square had been a disaster for the regime, and it also raised a terrible question. If China no longer believed in revolutionary communism or in democracy, what did it believe in, apart from money? Deng Xiaoping's solution was to go back into the past and reawaken an old, powerful fear. That what had happened in Tiananmen Square had really been part of a giant conspiracy by the West to destroy China.
The thing is, that's almost certainly true. It's almost certainly true that the West were involved in hyping up Tiananmen Square, democracy. Milton Friedman literally wrote a book called Capitalism and Freedom, where he outlined this as the plan. As China opens up its market, so it will open up its political system, blah, blah, blah. So it's not like in the realms of deep conspiracy that the West have been trying to mess with the Chinese.
Did you used to read Justin Raimondo's columns?
I did used to read Justin Raimondo, yeah.
Back a long way, like maybe late 90s, he wrote quite a few or some long columns about Tiananmen Square. And he did say, yeah, this is not what it appears at all. This was not a democracy protest. There was something else that we just haven't heard of before, as some cult or religious, I don't know, mixed with some sort of nationalist, complicated stuff that I don't really know about. But he said, yeah, it's not as it appears at all. And yes, the CIA was involved and stuff. Yeah. Might be worth revisiting those,
and a bit of racism as well, right? There was like some, wasn't it against black people being in?
Supposedly, the initial protests that spiraled into what we know as Tiananmen Square was sparked by African Marxist students being brought in to share a dormitory with some Chinese students, and they were completely against this. I'm not able to find any more details on that though, so I don't want to.
Yeah. I can confirm that came up in my research last week. Yeah.
It was a conspiracy, he said, that had been going on for 150 years.
Sorry, I meant to add that if that's true about the African students, I mean, from what my experience, not like Far Eastern or Southeast Asian people, well, most of Asia actually, like it appears just from things people have said to me over time that most of Asia regards black people as like not even human, like they're like either frightened of or abhorrent to what, like they don't even consider blacks to be human, So,
well, I mean,
so to then be given like,
let's just say they're pretty racist. They're pretty racist. Yeah.
They are.
Utterly,
It's something about the Chinese. They have that very, very strong ethnic in-group preference, not just for kind of not in the grander sense of the sense that not liking blacks, but in the sense that they're very Han supremacist, for example. The Han being the main ethnic group. Even though they pay lip service to the idea of kind of a multi-ethnic China, from what I understand, talking to people that have lived there, it's kind of like almost cartoonishly racist on some level when it comes to outsiders.
Haven't they done quite a bit of research in China, basically debunking out of Africa theory? Because I mean, people will know more than me about this, but my understanding is that the Chinese have a separate theory of human origins, where they argue that it's not out of Africa. It's almost more like, I guess you call it the Sid Meier civilization theory, where,
well,
like in Civilization, everybody's got a different starting point on the map. I'm pretty sure the Chinese have got this idea that one group of humans started there, another group of humans started, somewhere in the West, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, the as I understand it, out of Africa theory has basically been considered disproved for a very long time now, in Europe and in Asia. In that there are just far more credible theories that have long been that have kind of long been known since the kind of mid 80s, I think. But the out of Africa theory just remains too convenient, too politically correct to die, I think. So it just remains one of these sort of ideas that floats around, But as far as I know, it's not considered particularly credible anymore.
Jared Diamond owned. Again,
I would just say it's not just the Chinese who like, among whom it's a widespread view that blacks are like subhuman or something. It's like I've heard that from Indians commonly. I knew an Indian woman who was going out with a black guy in utter secrecy. She said they will literally kill him, maybe me as well. That was in England. It's
Wow.
like, it's just ordinary. Yeah, that's the subcontinent. Plus Southeast Asia, I think much the same. Like, not everyone hates them, but
you don't see that. It's true. You don't see the black Indian mix very often.
No, and a lot of Jews, I think, would totally reject blacks. But then there are people like Jimi Hendrix, not Jimi Hendrix, Lenny Kravitz's parents, obviously mixed.
They need to do a sequel to Bend It Like Beckham, don't they? Bend It Like Ngubu.
Who was the
Tell that story.
Who was the Jewish actor or famous person? Was it Adam Sandler, or who said, was it David Schwimmer, someone like that, who was like, when I grew up dreaming, wishing I was black and all this sort of stuff. who was the guy who said, was it David Schwimmer?
I think that was David Schwimmer. But doesn't that support your theory that there are a core of like genuinely extremely socially liberal Jews that apply it to themselves as well, rather than applying it just cynically to the outgroup?
Well, no, I mean, there's definitely. I mean, I think there's some. I mean, again, other people will know better than me because this is not my kind of area of expertise, you could say. But there was a long-standing alliance where they saw their struggle as mutual, right? Or in theory, it was mutual, which was called formally the Jewish Black Alliance, which was all through the civil rights era. And so, like, for example, in the music of Bob Dylan, right, he seems to have an affinity. He's got that song Hurricane about Reuben Carr, the champion of the world who was wronged and all this sort of stuff. Or Hollis Brown lived on the outskirts of town and all. Like, there's a lot of cross-pollination where the black man's struggle is seen in some ways as being kind of emblematic of the universal struggle against, the bad racists or whatever it is, So
that's what's referred to in the Blues Brothers. There's the bit with the American National Socialist White People's Party, which was a real party apparently. The bit the guy says in that, it expresses that from the other end. I won't say the quote.
Yeah.
Well, according to the chap you had on before, Stalin was responsible for all that, wasn't he?
Yeah, I kept quiet during that, but I thought, he's just lost
he's lost the
audience. Doesn't know that a huge chunk of my audience is just against the Civil Rights Act.
You had thousands of prospective Marxists, and they all turned away the minute he said that Stalin started civil rights in America. In the bit between the interview, I was like, I have to tell you, when you started talking about civil rights, you will have lost a lot of people against civil rights around these buttons. But wait till our next chat is pretty spicy, actually. So look out, because we talk about
the Boston riots of the mid-70s and busing. And Caleb Maupin has found this communist group who were against busing. There was like a rogue communist group who sided, who found themselves on the same side as white nationalists.
Very interesting.
In the mid-70s, and they had all sorts of reasons for it. It's actually fascinating discussion, a whole bit of hidden history. So stick with Caleb. He's he's a bit of a, as you can imagine, with anybody from left, he's going to be a mixed bag, but he's full of really interesting information. He also mentioned this writer, and I've just got a whole new bunch of Stalinist books coming in from this Indian writer called Dutt. Have you heard of him? Something Ralph
Palm Dutt, yeah, Rajani Palm Dutt.
Yeah, Palm Dutt. Yes, he was actually Indian in Britain. Was like an all-out Stalinist who wrote like books defending Stalin, and he had this whole idea about what needs to happen in Britain, why the British Empire declined, what fascism is, what India needs to do, and so on. And I'm just kind of interested because obviously after 56, the left just buried all this stuff. It just buries it. It doesn't like to talk about it, right? And I'm kind of fascinated to know what they were saying, you know. So yeah, that will be something.
Palm Dutt was also the main theorist of the Communist Party, the British Communist Party of Great Britain.
Yeah, he edited their. It wasn't their version of Pravda or whatever, their Marxist Weekly or whatever.
Yeah.
He was the editor for a very long time, but then he was denounced for staying loyal to Stalin.
That's right, 56, right? Yeah, he didn't break. Yeah.
It had begun back in the 19th century, when the British had invaded China and forced opium onto the Chinese people. Deng now ordered a vast propaganda campaign to begin. Its aim was to spread the idea of a conspiracy. At the centre of the campaign was a multi-million-dollar film, including British actors. It told the story of how the British had brought hundreds of tons of opium into the port of Canton, and how the Chinese had tried to stop them. But the British, led by Queen Victoria, were determined to smash their resistance and use the opium to reduce the Chinese people to zombies, and so control the whole world.
Gentlemen, the fact is, whoever gets hold of China will have the entire East. The 19th century.
I wonder who the British actors were in that film, and did they get in trouble for being in it?
No, there's actually some really good actors in there. It's a film from 1997. I will post the link. It's available on YouTube. You have to maybe watch it through a VPN though, because there's a French company that owns the rights that won't allow it to be on YouTube seen in the UK. But there's really great actors in. I mean, one of my favorite actors, Bob Peck, the Uber commie Corin Redgrave, Edward Petherbridge, Nigel Davenport.
Of course, Corin Redgrave's in it.
all kind of fairly solid guys, and it does look quite good actually. The script is clunky as hell, but they definitely have the scale and the extras and the action sequences. It's sort of not bad.
Yeah,
I was hoping they might pick up Christopher Lee when he was like mid-90s out on a limb. I thought he might crop up.
There is a film which was banned. It's very hard to get hold of, but he's out there with Christopher Lee playing Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who was the founder of Pakistan. Quite an interesting film. He considered it his greatest ever performance on screen.
Yes.
And he was very, very upset that the film never got screened or officially released for that. But just to say about this film about the Opium War. I mean, first of all, one minor point: we did push hell of a lot of opium onto China, but it wasn't as if we brought it there, because that Chinese army you saw in that one shot saying, we have to throw the opium into the sea, expel the foreigners. The reason we beat them in that battle was because their army was completely out their heads on opium, lying around on the floor. They weren't in any condition to fight. The other thing is, and I've noticed that the Chinese do this, and also I've noticed that the Iranians and a lot of Middle Eastern countries like to do this. They always seem to have this idea that the monarch of Britain is the one actually formulating these policies, like talking about invading China and selling opium. And I find that quite interesting because do you remember there was that bit of Iranian propaganda where Queen Elizabeth II was like a pirate going around stealing oil and this kind of thing? And it's very funny because obviously if you read the if you know anything about the politics of the 1800s, or you read the diaries of Queen Victoria, she was very interested in politics, and she kept aware of things, but she had nowhere near this level of influence or control over government policy. A lot of these things happen by accident.
Yeah, I told you before. My grandfather kept a picture on his desk of Queen Elizabeth, which I think was a fairly common thing to do in that part of the world.
Right.
So she was seen as for better or for the worse, as the face of the country. So
I think Britain is another country that, in the sort of state propaganda of that country, Britain is the chief demon, right? Like in Iran, it has been Britain more than America, at least until recent decades, right? And then I think in China as well, the century of humiliations and all this stuff. And there's certain other America had an anti-British Empire narrative, very, very important one, for a long time. Maybe not now, but
well, when you're top heel for so long, you've got to expect it, right? When you're the head, when you're the number one, you're going to be the lead heel in every other country, aren't you? So
I would just say I've not looked into the Opium Wars and Britain's policies in that time, but I have heard it said that specifically one member of the Sassoon family was the leading beneficiary and lobbyist for all this.
That is true. That is true. Yes.
The Chinese propaganda even created an early computer game where you could fight against the British as they invaded.
That is banging. I want to play that. Game.
Can we track down an emulator?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that game is. I did track it down. It's on archive.org, so you can probably download. I don't know if it's executable, the file, but you can download. It's called Opium War, 1997, by Jinpan Electronic in China. And it's pretty much as you see there. I mean, it looks kind of like a sort of Civ game, I suppose. When I tried searching for it, it got confused with Sid Meier's Civ 1 from the screenshots, but it was a Chinese game. It is out there. Not played it. It's mistitled Optim War as well as Opium War for some reason. Maybe just something in the sort of translations that have been had. I'm interested in this little sequence though, because I was just trying to work out the music that was used there. One is the Pac-Man theme.
Yeah,
I couldn't work out which one. I had to sit through about 60 versions of the Pac-Man theme. I think it might be the one that was a Game Boy one or something like that. But there was a second bit of music which I couldn't.
Simon, I'm only going to say this once, right?
Yeah.
In preparation for this stream, you don't actually have to sit through 6 versions of.
I know.
I
was trying to find the mix. The one that's listed as being the mix that they use in Can't Get You Out of My Head isn't actually the one that's used. So I just couldn't work it out. But I just get. Yeah, okay. I get slightly autistic. Determined. To track
how
down
the Soviet Union had that possibly mythical worker called Stakhanov, who dug like hundreds of tons of coal in one shift. Simon Roberts is the Stakhanov of this. I mean, 60 versions of Pac-Man just to tell us exactly which version that theme was from. It's
either Game Boy or Game Gear. I don't know what that platform was. Yeah.
Also, you can tell that the spending was really lavish because the quality of the graphics here and the scale of the game, and also the budget clearly spent on that movie, big money was put into this propaganda campaign. Which just quickly, I can't remember whose Substack it was on, but there was an interesting point someone made about a year ago where they said that so many generations now have grown up playing things like Hearts of Iron and Civilization, that you've got this generation of sort of autistic young men who see everything in terms of great power politics. So there's sort of like maybe propaganda through video games can be beneficial.
I think I may have found it, Simon. Is it not this? I think you're going to love this, Horus, right? Is it not this? Power Pill, right?
Oh, yeah.
Power Pill, a remix of Pac-Man by none other than Aphex Twin.
Oh, no way.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Go on.
Yeah, it might be. that.
Pac-Man by Power Pill is an album released in Europe by Richard D. James under the synonymous Power Pill and Aphex Twin. It consists of 4 techno remixes of the original Pac-Man game. Now, surely, if it's it's Richard Curtis playing Pac-Man, it's got to be the Aphex Twin remix, hasn't it?
Can you risk playing us a snatch from it?
Should I see if I can find it?
We got to be careful, man. We don't want to get the stream.
Because there are various remixes, and they augment the Pac-Man theme in different ways. Extra drum tracks and bits of mood drone and stuff like that. But it sounds like it's actually a clip from an actual Pac-Man game being that he's just spliced together with another theme from another game, which I can't identify. I'm just
right. What I'm going to do, I'm going to download it and risk playing it. Okay, because we've already played it. Let's face it. So, right, it's downloading now. Let's see.
This is going to be completely different, isn't it?
Did Kurto use Aphex Twin version?
It'd be nice if he had. It would all make sense then.
Oh, I wanted it to be true so badly.
Doesn't sound like it, Simon, does it?
This could just be the intro setup bit, and then it kind of goes into the. No,
it's
not, is it?
We'll have to track it down.
Yeah.
Not one of Aphex Twin's finest, that one. It's Donkey Kong.
Is it Donkey Kong? Right, I was
Donkey
wondering
Kong.
it was from another game.
Donkey Kong, without doubt, it's Donkey Kong. Yeah.
There you go.
Now, the campaign said, the West were
Probably the NES title screen of Donkey Kong, if I had to guess. But
Adding it to my notes because it was driving me nuts.
Look how
Trying to
cool
do
the
the
cutscenes are for this game. Look at that.
Yeah.
I want to play this game. It looks amazing.
again.
1997, it's banging. Look how good this game is.
It's amazing. This is. You got to get more car on this.
I'll post the link on the archive site. It might be downloadable.
What the Chinese were alleging in their campaign was historically accurate. But what they didn't know was that the opium trade had also had powerful consequences inside Britain itself. It had started to undermine the self-confidence of the British Empire and introduce a dark and corrupt.
A lot of people complaining that it's not streaming on Twitter properly. Now, I have noticed that the views on Twitter are lower than usual. I've checked it and it does seem to be working, but I'll post the link on Twitter to tell people, okay, look, if Twitter's not if Twitter isn't working, click here. There we go. So you can watch live in YouTube.
Corrosive fear into the heart of British society. By the middle of the 19th century, those who ran Britain were already aware of the horrors created by the slave trade. For 200 years, the British had transported millions of Africans to become slaves in their colonies in the Caribbean and in the Americas.
One of the greatest mistakes in history, you have to say.
Absolutely. Perhaps not for the reasons that Curtis.
Not for the reasons that people.
No. But yeah, we got to apologise for that one.
Forces behind the rise of the British Empire. Now they began to realise that they had also done something terrible to China. That by forcing opium onto the country, they had poisoned and corrupted millions of people. They hadn't enslaved them physically. They had enslaved their minds.
By the way, I've got a book coming soon, which has been hyped quite a lot by War Strike, which is a 1,000-year history of England with a certain group at front and centre. And I'll be interested to review passages like this to see if there's kind of any other stories there It's been really massively hyped, this book. So I finally kind of going to check it out. So we might revisit some of these things in later weeks once I get hold of this book. It's by Aldag, I think it is. Aldag, I think is the name of the author.
And in return, Britain had received a vast wave of money in silver that made it the richest and most powerful country in the world. One historian wrote, "Deeply involved as it was in one of the most pernicious yet well-organized and profitable drug trades that has ever existed, the British Empire was rotten at its heart."
Pause. Just to explain that shot a bit, that's Clevedon Pier in Somerset, and the reason that's significant, it's a sort of relic of high empire. It was built after the slave trade ended, but it's at a point down on the coast near the Bristol Channel, where the current basically takes you down past Portugal to the west coast of Africa, where the early slave trade sort of kicked off. So that's the sort of significance of that.
Guy in the chat saying, "I've just realised AA has been less depressing recently and unsettling." That's probably because I've been doing the interviews, so I've had to be sociable and nice to people and polite. Whereas usually, in previous months, you've just had me ranting at you, so maybe that's why.
Can I just call us back to what Curtis said a minute ago? He said was he quoting someone when he said that like the British, I don't know, was it the British slave trade had made Britain a rich country? Was that wasn't Curtis's own words, was it? Or
no,
I think that was.
It was his. It wasn't a quote or anything.
He was saying that.
Yeah, that is ridiculous. That is
doesn't add up.
Simply not true.
Well, no, because I mean the whole transatlantic slave trade thing came in fairly late in the game. We'd already done a huge amount of imperialism by that point. I agree that we got pretty rich out of pushing stuff into China, but the slave trade thing doesn't really add up.
Well, it's another formulation of the same sort of standard left-wing attack on Britain and anywhere that had an empire, in that they just say your country. They always use the same phrase: your country's wealth was built on the backs of slavery or on the backs of slaves. Right? They always use that phrase, built on the backs of, because if they were specific, it would turn out to be false. It doesn't mean anything. Britain was wealthy before colonialism and empire. Obviously, some business interests, like the East India Company or whatever, and their owners certainly benefited from all sorts of dodgy stuff. And people who owned plantations and owned like slave ships and stuff, they benefited. And obviously, some of their money was taxed, right? That is the substance of that attack, is that some things were built with tax money, like your streets and stuff were built with tax money taken from people who profited from slaves who are of the same nation as you. Therefore, you're all culpable and you've all got to pay reparations. He's sliding into the same dog shit as that.
Is it not true that Bristol in particular, though, did get quite rich?
Even then, what? It's just like the people living in terraced houses, working like 50-hour weeks.
There were significant families that grew wealthy. I mean, in that shot we saw of Clevedon, there was a number of families down there, like the Elton family, the Finsel family, people like John Pinney, who were, there was either people who were invested in, as you say, wasn't directly the slave trade itself that was making the money, it was the sugar that was coming from the plantations in the West Indies that was making the money, or even the brass industry, which some of the guys made brass goods to pay off the African slave traders from whom they picked up their cargoes.
Well, yeah, that's the bit that never gets brought up, is that they weren't just rocking up in Africa and kidnapping people. They were doing very lucrative deals with local monarchies, basically, to get the slaves.
They found slaves for sale when they went to the west coast of Africa.
Exactly. I mean, my paternal family in East Africa was doing a roaring trade with the Arabs for a number of centuries, I should say. But I won't say any more.
Nobody's saying Oman owes reparations to Nigeria, though the case would be the same, or not Nigeria.
Well, yeah.
Oman, the Omani Empire, all down East Africa, thrived on slavery. Obviously, every other empire has got critics. The Mongol Empire, it was based on mass slaughter, and so on and so on, right?
I mean, the obvious counterpoint is that also Britain was the only place that abolished it. He was responsible for the abolition of the slave trade, and that's
serious
how we think of it
expense
as
as
a
well.
bad thing. You know,
And
so.
devoted its armed forces to stopping other countries doing it as well.
Yeah.
Why does nobody ever make the argument, though? Look, okay, yeah, it was bad, but we got these people to thank for Notorious B.I.G. and Lizzo and Dizzy Rascal and all the other great things that we enjoy today.
Well,
Look, if it hadn't, I know it was a bad thing, but if it hadn't happened, look how rich we've been by twerking and other such things.
Well, I mean, this is because there's been a pretty heavy psyop against that, because back in the day, the kind of original like pre-civil rights movements to do with Africans in the Americas was based on something called Back to Africa and negritude, which was all about this idea that being brought over to America was this terrible historical aberration, and the blacks had to basically culturally and physically remove themselves back to Africa. Actually, practically achieving that was obviously, you know, the scale of organization needed for that was never quite there. But then that all changed. All of a sudden, in the 60s, you get this very heavily American state-funded push for someone like MLK, who's all about kind of integration. And you had in the 30s, W.E.B. Du Bois, which is the correct pronunciation of his name,
Yes.
who used to argue that he was like the original kind of black shitlib, effectively. He was like your original kind of civil rights grifter in the United States, you know, kind of arguing for kind of equality and integration and this kind of thing. Whereas most of the far more sensible, educated blacks said, well, no, we just got to go. I mean, this is not our country. We just got to.
There is a great study to be made. Someone should do a book on this if it's not been done already. But it's him and Martin Luther King and the people who supported them on the one side. Du Bois was sort of a Marxist as well, right? An anti-white, right?
Yeah,
and,
very much so.
Yeah, and Martin Luther King was obviously, well, I don't know, we can go into that. But on the other side, you had Marcus Garvey, who was the Back to Africa guy who tried to physically make that happen, you know, set up a shipping line and so on and so on. Didn't really, I don't know, not many people did it. But and then you've also got like figures like Booker T. Washington, who I think was also a separatist in a certain sense, like as in we need to succeed for ourselves, right?
Yes, well, he had a far more respectable argument, which is basically that, like, look, if you're going to stay in America, you have to play by American rules. So basically, he wanted blacks to set up their own businesses and corporations and kind of stop behaving a certain way, you know, and kind of pull literally kind of it was sort of like old school progressive libertarianism, where, you know, you pull yourself up by the boots and kind of get on in the world. Whereas Du Bois, from the get-go, even before Gibbs were really a thing, was just arguing for more Gibbs, more money from
I mean,
more government support.
I would argue that the real intellectual inheritor of Booker T was Thomas Sowell.
Yes, very much so.
Thomas Sowell is basically, it's not even that low key, especially in his early stuff. It's kind of quite explicit. He's basically a black separatist. I mean, his argument is not separate as in separate nation, but Thomas Sowell consistently in all his books says we were better off when we were separate. We were better off when we were setting up our own businesses. We were better off when we ran our own schools. We were better off, you know. And basically, he's against integration. He's against civil rights. He's against, like, you know, when I say he's against civil rights, he's not against, like, you know, equal votes and things like that. But he's basically anti, like, all of his books poke holes in the civil rights narrative and integration and welfare and Gibbs and all of that, because his whole view is blacks were doing better under Jim Crow. Under Jim Crow.
Well, but this is the problem, is that it's just undeniably statistically true. And I mean, there's countless testimonies from people who remember that time, even if they were kind of more progressive back then. They kind of look back and go, well, yeah, I mean, it's all completely buggered now. It was better then because you had a kind of internal separatism that allowed for that ethnic group to basically build something for themselves. And I mean, you can look at footage of early 1940s Harlem, which you know, there even back then there were jokes about Harlem being, you know, the kind of terrible, kind of crime-ridden black inner city bit. And you look at footage, and it's like compared to now, it looks like a utopia. You know, I mean, the streets are spotless. All the storefronts are gleaming. You know, they're all dressed in suits and Sunday best and all this. And it's just kind of like, where did all this go in order to get to, you know,
that's where
things we see now.
That's where Thomas Sowell grew up. Is in Harlem in the 1930s, and he's constantly saying, like, look, he even goes through who his neighbors were and like who the people were down his street, and he said, like, all of these black people who lived down my street have gone on to be successful. You know what? It was just luck. It was just, you know, we were all genetically gifted. It was like, no, we had proper schooling. We listened to the rules. We got ahead. We did as we were told. You know,
family structure. Yeah.
We had family structure. You know, we didn't go in for like all of these sort of victim narratives. And you know, that was the reason why Thomas Sowell resonated with me when I was first getting into it, because I saw the same kind of victim mentality in Wales. This is going to be an unusual, but like what Wales after Thatcher, I think really did develop in some of those old mining towns and so on, a victim mentality where they just refused ever to kind of take matters into their own hands. So I don't sound like a mean old libertarian again, Horace, but like I still have the sympathy. I still see the argument that it's like you can't just sit around waiting for a handout. You have to actually fucking do something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
even if Thatcher did destroy them, yeah, it does you no good to eternally lament and curse the past.
Well, the point is that all of those things that happened to the black community that Thomas Sowell talks about happened in Wales. The drugs, the collapse of the family structure, you know, abortion, like all of those social maladies. You know, what people thought of later as chavs and all that sort of stuff, or the development of the social underclass, or people stuck on welfare, unemployment, all of those things happened in Wales. So, I mean, I still think there's strong arguments to be made in, you know, for that old Sowell line in some ways.
But I just wanted to add about the, you know, the sort of debate among blacks about whether to be separatist or integrate, if those are satisfactory terms. Like Al Sharpton is another figure who's on the integrate side, right? And just grab what you can from the state sort of thing. But on the other side, on the opposite side, have you ever seen? Well, he was in this actually, but there was a documentary. Louis Theroux did a documentary called Black Nationalists in the late 90s, and you see several different figures. Al Sharpton's one of them, and he's a civil rights guy, right? He's also a criminal, apparently, according to Michael Franzese, the mafia guy. But on the other side, you had. Well, there was the Black Panthers in the 60s, 70s, right? But there was also the new Black Panther Party in the 90s, 2000s. And they were outright just racialist. And you see Khalid Mohammed in that. He died not long after that documentary was made. But he is for a separate nation on the American landmass. But yeah, like we want about 1/7 of the USA as a black nation. And I was watching this. I remember at the time, and ever since, I was just like, that sounds like a good idea. I mean, just like we could solve so many problems by just having it. You can still have some people living mixed up if they want to be, but you can have an option for both to get away from the other who don't want to be anywhere near each other. How much friction could be reduced? You know, like how many problems could be solved by just doing that? But of course, no, because the whole point is to force everyone together. That's what civil rights is, right?
Well, this was the conclusion Malcolm X came to, where he said, well, integration. I mean, I got to be careful how I phrase this. But let's say he eventually concluded partly that the result of civil rights and American quote unquote multiculturalism had been only to the benefit of a certain small ethnic group within that country, and that really blacks and whites were not enemies. They were just people who had been forced to occupy the same land unreasonably, and that some form of separatism was not only necessary but right.
That's what the Nation of Islam would argue as well, I think, right?
Yeah.
There's that very interesting interview with Muhammad Ali and Parkinson, isn't there? That you can see Parkinson squirming as Ali is, you know, slinging all this Malcolm X shit on him. You know, so.
And that knowledge led to guilt. In the 1870s, a mass movement was formed. It was called the Society for the Suppression of the Opium Trade. It published pamphlets and books about the horrors that were happening in China. They caused a sensation, and hundreds of thousands joined the movement. But as the campaign grew...
I often wonder, sorry to pause it again, this whole stream is about British and American exceptionalism, right? But I wonder if the Achilles heel is actually having the moral conscience, actually having this being like, look, people in the country had a problem with this, just as people had a problem with slavery. But then that's used as a stick to beat you over the head with. Because there's no other country that says, oh, yeah, actually, this was pretty wrong. We shouldn't have done that type thing. And then, do you know what I mean? Because it's like if you remember the way the SJWs and the woke operated, the reason that never apologize became a thing is because if you apologize, they then use it as a weapon. And I wonder about that, because it's like a double-edged sword. You can say, well, it's a great thing that they recognized that how wrong it was. But at the same time, it's like the admission of it then is used as ammo.
Remember when Tony Blair was Prime Minister? On a few occasions, he went to other countries and apologised to them on behalf of Britain, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Remember this? I can't remember which country. Did he do China? I can't remember.
He apologised for several things during that period.
It doesn't stop them hating us. I can tell you that.
Well, no, it just makes you look weak, and it makes them lose. The thing about a lot of these places that we used to have colonies in, and this is true of most former subject peoples towards former imperial peoples, is that there is a sense of respect, because even if it's a conquest relationship, it is still a relationship. There is still some connection between those groups of peoples, and if you go around apologizing, it makes you look weak and cretinous. I mean, it's kind of, and it's almost insulting the people you formerly colonized, because it's like, well, if they're this weak and pathetic, how did they ever get a grip over us, type thing.
I think experiencing the rule of law, which you got under the British Raj or whatever, under the British Empire, you got the rule of law in most places, and it did operate. That makes an impression. Like, some people really like that because it just makes it's orderly and it's peaceful, and they can do business or whatever. They can plan for the future, so they get the advantage, even if they wouldn't have originated that system in their culture. Having received that under English rule, I think some people really, because you can build on it. You can build things for the decades in the future and stuff.
Yeah.
Just a brief diversion on this image we're seeing here, this pamphlet, a talk with English boys and girls about opium. I couldn't get hold of any of these pamphlets online. Actually, they were published by the Society for the Suppression of the Opium Trade, as Curtis says, in around 1860. But it would be interesting to have a look at them. Academic works about addiction and the history of the opium wars obviously have quoted some of these things, but they're obviously in libraries that have not been digitized or online. But they have sort of lurid tales in them about 6-year-olds on opium and all this kind of stuff.
I mean, to be fair, I hate the way that kind of this kind of Quaker style Victorian shit livery became the stick that was beaten over Britain's head all the time. But there is something to be said for having a national moral conscience, I think. I mean, because let's say you met up with a friend and you discovered he'd gotten really rich from just ceaselessly, ruthlessly pushing drugs to some slum. You'd be a bit. It's not really on, is it? It's like, is it acceptable to do it in China? I mean, again, not value free, but there is an argument for, I think, some kind of national honor. It's in the same way that I don't think Britons and Europeans should do kind of Israeli style glorying of unreasonable violence. It just doesn't. Even if you're fighting a totally just war, it's just not in our character. I don't think it shouldn't be encouraged.
It definitely a dark episode in British history, I would say. The opium. I don't try to justify it. I think it's rightly, but my issue is always, why don't other nations ever apologize for their atrocities or for bad things? Why is it only ever Britain and America that does this? Where's the Turkish apology? All the shit they did. Where's the very where is it? Come on, Erdogan, come out and apologize for the actions of the Ottomans.
I want to see Uzbekistan apologise for Timur. That's the big one. They got a big statue of Timur, haven't they?
Where's the Mongolian apology for the Genghis Khan?
Again, they got a
burning down
massive
all those
statue of
sites?
Genghis Khan.
It's like the biggest statue in the world, isn't it? It's Genghis Khan. It's
like
weird.
Russia as well.
Because
like
the
Russia is white people, but they have like glorying statues of battles smashing their enemies. They like a bit of that. As well,
I mean, they openly brag about the mass rape of Germany in 1945. You know, this kind of thing. But I mean, the problem is that our opium is liberalism. We've got so hopped up on that drug that we're now just too far. We can't operate from a position of kind of national pride anymore or national honor. It's just prostration. With the added shield of being still a financial powerhouse, so you don't have to, accept too much stick.
I would like to see the Arabs apologize for the actions of Muhammad and also for the actions of various other Arab empires throughout history. I would like to see.
Muhammad's probably in the Epstein files, given his proclivities. It's hard to look up.
That's good. That's not good. There's going to be emails. It'll be.
We
do not endorse the position of.
Don't bring your curved daggers round to me. I'm not open for it.
Just wondering briefly, and sensitive with respect to Panama as well, that the question of Catholic guilt, is a kind of an easy sort of trope to quote, but the influence of that, let's say in the American political lineage, families like the Kennedys and so on, I wonder how much there was an exploitation of the idea of Catholic sensitivity to guilt.
I don't think that really comes into it by that point. Yeah. I think Catholic guilt only works on a very personal moral level, or in countries that have that very communitarian thing, like in Ireland, you can kind of run a country on that type of guilt. There's no way that the Kennedys felt any guilt towards anything they ever did. I mean, they were a family of mafioso bootleggers who forced their way up the ladder.
As soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I was wrong.
and then proceeded to spend most of his short presidency, banging whores and doing drugs, and then died.
Yeah.
He did do some daft lefty decolonial shit as well. He was all on board with all that stuff.
I was thinking of it in the sense in the way that one of the general themes of Curtis documentaries is the attempts to create these scalable systems of control, which obviously fail when they encounter reality.
I mean, I would just kind of, this is not like sort of pro-Catholic stuff as such. I mean, I don't have, I don't really go in for that publicly anymore per se. But I will say that my argument against the idea of Catholic guilt being a bad thing for empires is, well, who was one of the greatest colonizers of all time? Spain. Right, but at the absolute height of their Catholic fanaticism as well, bringing God to the New World.
Can I ask that? Do other country have France ever apologized for Napoleon or Charlotte? I know it's a bit late, but the actions of Charlemagne, right? You might think of him as a great king, but he did some pretty, but he killed a lot of people. It's a kind of stupid, it's a weird thing that we apologize for this thing that happened. At a certain point, doesn't it just become history? This is what I don't get.
It's particular Anglo vulnerability to feel you have to apologize for everything.
And lefties apologise on our behalf, right, when we're not guilty. A bit off topic, but we mentioned the Spanish Empire there. Have you guys ever seen that film Aguirre? It's a German film.
Yes,
Wrath of God. Kinski.
That's a good film, right?
Herzog. Yeah.
Yeah,
excellent film.
Like
Excellent
no,
film. But it's based on a real expedition as well.
Right.
It didn't quite end up as mystical and kind of weird as the Herzog film, but there was an expedition of that nature that got lost. But there was a monk who managed to get back and write an account of it.
My good friend Bo from the Lotus Eaters said that what happened was that people living along the rivers that went, I don't know, up deeper into Ecuador or whatever, or Bolivia or something, as it is now. The natives there, because they got used to the idea of the conquistadors being a threat, they would just tell them, "Are you looking for El Dorado? We've heard that you're looking for El Dorado." It's just a bit further up
down the river,
and they just kept directing them further up, and until they just died, or or they were ambushed or whatever. Yeah, so El Dorado was like a trick to just get them killed. It's fair play, really. It's quite clever.
Do you think we'll live to see the day that Israel apologizes for, like, we apologize for Ariel Sharon, Robert Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, and
Didn't
Benjamin.
they? I mean, they're obviously not for that stuff, but didn't they? I might be misremembering. What wasn't there some movement in the kind of 70s and 80s where they did try to put on a sort of more caring image in regards to their conquests and cleansings? I seem to remember reading about some Israeli president who went around building memorials, and I think they've all since been demolished by Netanyahu. I can't remember. I may be misremembering. I think it was a brief period when the sort of Israeli Labour left was in power or something like that.
There was certainly an outreach program. I remember being at high school in Australia in the mid-80s, and we had this very unusual event once where they gathered us in the assembly hall because there was going to be a talk by a couple of Israeli university students. So it was kind of like a PR sort of blitz era.
Do you think we'll live to see America apologize for Donald Trump? Just be like, sorry, we went a bit schizo for a couple of years there. Sorry for this whole era.
They basically have been for the entire time. I mean, what may be somewhat controversial, but one of the reasons I'm thinking that maybe Trump actually would have genuinely lost in 2020 is that every single American I knew, even relatively right wing ones, said they had to vote against him because they felt he was just too embarrassing. There was just something about him where it's like even if they tacitly supported his policies, they just went, "Oh, we got it just doesn't. It's just not quite right." So there was that kind of attitude. So maybe
A strange thing happened.
Who else can we apologize for? I'd like to apologize for Jeremy Beadle. You need to get your Rolodex, Simon. You're the Forrest Gump of low-level celebrities.
Yeah.
Jamie Theakston.
Exactly.
Toby Anstis. I'm trying to think of who was that guy who presented Blue Peter and then went to do Wheel of Fortune?
John Leslie.
I would like to apologize for John
Richard
Leslie,
Bacon.
Chris Evans,
Richard Bacon, Chris Tarrant.
Yeah. Russell Brand.
You don't think of like proper criminals. You just think of poor television presenters.
Yeah, I think we do owe the world an apology for some of these figures.
Andy Peters.
Peters. Yeah. Rishi Sunak. We'd like to apologize to the world for having Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. Yeah. That was an embarrassment.
I mean, I hate Robbie Williams. I hate his shit music. So yeah, him.
We should apologize. We should apologize for the Beatles at some point.
We should apologize for them. We should apologize to America specifically for the Beatles.
Specifically for John Lennon and Imagine, the song Imagine, the carnage that has wrought upon the world.
Who apologizes for Desiree? Is that our fault or what?
Desiree, was that? I'd rather have a piece of toast.
Yeah.
Read the evening news.
David Brent's favorite singer. Yeah.
Life, life.
Yeah, that was her worst song, but she had a string of others as well. That one was particularly laughable.
I'm afraid of the ghost. Rather have a piece of toast.
Proper awful music. Is she our fault? I don't know.
Was Hadaway British?
No, Hadaway's German.
Is he? All right.
Hadaway's not the guy.
They need to stop apologising for the mid-centuries and apologise for fucking Hadaway.
Hadaway is just the name of the act, but the producer was just some white German person, and they hired that singer to sing it.
The bloke is not even Hadaway.
He's not Hadaway. No.
I didn't know that. Wow.
I don't think either of them are Hadaway. They just released a single under the name Hadaway, I think. And obviously it's in English. It's a German song, but it's in English. Like, it's obviously pitched at us.
Where did Apache Indian come from?
Bradford. No, I don't know.
Yeah, we need to apologise for Apache Indian as well.
Bolton.
The guilt over what Britain had done to China began to mutate. It changed into fear. And at the end of the 19th century, a hysteria swept Britain, that the Chinese were preparing to take their revenge. There was a panic about Chinese-run opium dens in all the major cities. The truth was that there were less than 1,000 Chinese in Britain at that time, but the hysteria ran out of control. It was called the Yellow Peril.
Do you know, I have a book by the world's most anti-Semitic man of all time, Revelo P. Oliver, called The Yellow Peril, which is an interesting read. That was published in the 70s, I think. Kind of hard. You probably find it on archive.org, but kind of an interesting read. The Yellow Peril never really went away.
Well,
It kind of migrated over to America because they had their own version of it, didn't they? Do you remember they kicked them all out when they were building the railroads? And then there was another bout of it in the 70s when Nixon went over there, which we've covered. But some of these like uber right wingers like Oliver really weren't happy with the Yellow Peril in that era. So.
The thing is about China, and a lot of what the elites were talking about when we called it the Yellow Peril was the correct notion that given the right amount of time, China, with its wealth, population, land area, and resources, will basically become a world hegemon. Like at least in material terms. Now, whether or not they actually will get the sort of biospirit to do that, I think remains to be seen. But because effectively, if you actually put it down on paper, I think they basically have the resources to beat Britain and America and Europe several times over. That's what it was. I mean, the Tsar Nicholas II and Kaiser Wilhelm in the early 1900s, they were constantly writing letters to each other, and one of the major themes was they were both hugely concerned with the rise of China, and to a lesser extent Japan, but that's because Japan was a more immediate threat. But they believed that in 100 years or so, China would swamp both their empires.
Very much so. I mean, this isn't just a sort of random genre of kind of racist pulp fiction. It was sort of, as we would understand it, they were kind of futurology novels. They were sort of about invasion or future wars. And I mean, the most sort of high point example is something like War of the Worlds. If you're taking that at a sort of metaphoric level, some of Erskine Childer's stuff, Riddle of the Sands, things like that, they were all kind of looking at anticipating this sort of stuff. The interesting thing, this book, The Yellow Danger, one of the first ones he looks at, there is that anxiety that Hat's talking about there. A quote from it: England, having a genuine supremacy of racial value and valor, must, like the Christ of nations, with many an agony of sweat and blood, redeem mankind. The reign of hell, which had followed upon some Japanese victories during the Sino-Japanese War, was well known in Europe. If China had fared so at the hand of Japan, how would Europe fare at the hand of China led by Japan?
I'd also just like to add that I grew up reading the Dr. Fu Manchu books by Sax Rohmer, and they're excellent. I'd recommend them to any young man.
Sax Rohmer develops from this guy, Matthew Scheel, who writes The Yellow Danger. He has a sort of prototypical character called Dr. Yen Hao. That Fu Manchu kind of is a sort of derivation from, in some senses. Sax Rohmer very, very influenced by Scheel. I'll just read a little passage here from the Scheel book about Dr. Yen Hao. This is quite funny. He says, "Just allow me to introduce my friend here, Miss Seward, Dr. Yen Hao." In the light of the bus lamp, Ada Seward saw a very small man dressed in European clothes, yet a man whom she at once took to be Chinese. With a wrinkled grin, he put out his hand and shook hers. He was a man of remarkable visage. When his hat was off, one saw that he was nearly bald, and that his expansive brow was majestic. There was something brooding, meditative in the meaning of his long eyes. There was a brown and dark, and specially dirty shade of yellow tan to his skin. He was not really a Chinaman, or rather he was that, and more. He was the son of a Japanese father by a Chinese woman. He combined these antagonistic races in one man. In Dr. Yen Hao was the East.
Also, sorry.
Carry on.
Well, just as there's an interesting, somewhat counterpoint to the Yellow Peril characters, of course. Does people here familiar with the Charlie Chan films?
No of them.
They were very, very popular at one time. There's a series of books which were then made into very popular films. About based on a real man, a Chinese who lived in Hawaii, who became an inspector in the Honolulu police, and was known for being quite an eccentric but very effective crime stopper. And interestingly, they asked a Swedish actor to portray Charlie Chan in the first set of films, and he agreed to do it. But he was very sensitive to the idea of not wanting to do another Yellow Peril film. So he did it on the condition that he could spend 6 years in China actually learning Mandarin and absorbing Chinese culture.
Wow.
Then he came back and put the makeup on. And even though he did speak in that kind of Chinese accent type thing, he actually got it correct. He figured out how Chinese immigrants to Hawaii actually spoke, and
he'd listen to 60 different versions of the Pac-Man theme.
He would. He'd put in the effort.
One of my favorite things, by the way. Do you remember I bought all those Hammer films a couple of years ago? I like it when the films of that era do a bit of yellow. Have you ever seen Christopher Lee as Fu Manchu and stuff like that? Just...
or was it Max von Sydow who played Ming I know Ming is an alien or whatever, but he's supposed to be Chinese.
Yeah.
I kind of dig all of that stuff. I should mention, by the way, that that book I mentioned by Revelo P. Oliver, I've just been flicking through it. There's the front cover of it, the Yellow Peril, right? I've just remembered now. It is not what it appears. So even though it's about that, ostensibly, his actual thesis in that book is that that group that he was obsessed with infiltrated China in the 1st century BC, and then migrated over and infiltrated Japan at a certain time in history, and are basically stealing technology to build up China and Japan as a way of taking on as a way of kind of building them up against the West and profiting from the arbitrage in between type of thing. It's kind of an interesting conspiracy theory. Remembering it now, but like I said, the world's most anti-Semitic man, Revelo P. Oliver. So yeah.
Interesting thing about Fu Manchu, Sax Roma, his real name was Arthur Henry Sarsfield Ward.
Yeah.
And the Fu Manchu, quite an extensive series of Fu Manchu books, I have to say.
Yeah,
There's
very long.
The Insidious Dr. Fu Manchu, The Return of Dr. Fu Manchu, The Hand of Fu Manchu, a Chinese melodrama, The Daughter of Fu Manchu, The Mask of Fu Manchu, The Bride of Fu Manchu, The Trail of Fu Manchu, President Fu Manchu, The Drums of Fu Manchu, The Island of Dr. Fu Manchu, The Shadow of Fu Manchu, The Wrath of Fu Manchu, Re-enter Dr. Fu Manchu, The Eyes of Fu Manchu, The Word of Fu Manchu, The Bind of Fu Manchu, Emperor Fu Manchu, the last one.
He wins in the end, right?
Was Fu Manchu a product of this kind of?
Yes, though I don't think it's fair to say that he sat down and created the character because of the idea of the Yellow Peril. I think he was just inspired to use this kind of villainous Chinese archetype. Because I think the first book was 1898 or something. It was pretty early on, and then he wrote them up until the 30s, I think. But they were a popular series. I had a lot of them as a kid because I inherited a lot of kind of old books and things, and there was a set of very, very greatly loved Fu Manchu books, all ancient 30s ones, because obviously for modern audiences, I don't think there's going to be like a Penguin Classics Fu Manchu collected series anytime soon.
He's quite an esotericist as well. He was sort of in Rosicrucianism and interested in Hermeticism and Freemasonry and stuff.
That's the thing about him as a character, is that you genuinely sort of feared him because he was so clever. And he knew all this. He knew kind of everything there was to know about every esoteric sect and way of doing things. So you never really laughed at him. He came across as this genuinely very powerful villain. Also, AA, just on the mention of Revelo P. Oliver, could you remind me of the name of that Turkish or Ottoman anti-Jewish writer? Something Pasha.
Pasha?
No, the one from the 19th century you're talking about. I've forgotten that name now. Somebody, I'll see if I can find it. Incidentally, the person on the screen is Fu Manchu. It's Christopher Lee as Fu Manchu, or as I like to call him, Maven. Maven.
When I was a kid, sometimes there used to be Fu Manchu films on TV, and I didn't watch them, but in the Radio Times, it would always say Boris Karloff was the guy.
Yes.
And I just looked him up because I thought, Karloff, right? But no, he was just an English guy. But he was English, but one of his parents was Indian or something. But, yeah.
He did do the film. I think it was the 1932 film, Mask of Fu Manchu. Interesting thing about Roma, the guy who wrote the Fu Manchu stories, his work was actually banned in Nazi Germany. And he sort of thought this was a bit much because he thought his stories were not contrary to Nazi ideals. And the irony is, he died after succumbing to Asian flu.
It's funny, like I don't know why the Nazis would have banned it, but
because Hitler was very sensitive to racism. He was. He genuinely was. Him and Goebbels were always talking about how America mistreated the blacks. They felt quite strongly about that. They didn't particularly like blacks as a race, but they felt the Americans were a bit unnecessarily cruel. Although, to be fair, I imagine there's probably
you can't just drop this. Sorry, Hitler. Hitler was sensitive to racism.
He was sensitive. There are a couple of passages in Mein Kampf, and they harped on this a lot later because it was obviously quite a useful anti-American stick to beat them with. But they were always going on about how the Americans had genocided the natives. Because the stories of Winnetou the Apache are huge in Germany even to this day. The Germans have a bit of a thing for Native American stories and aesthetics, and there was a feeling among certain members of the National Socialist Party that America had a greatly shameful racial record in how they treated the blacks as well, by doing lynchings and having Jim Crow, and I think they just felt it was a bit cruel,
He was cruel, but he was fair.
Yeah.
Do you want to see the Boris Karloff Fu Manchu, by the way?
Yeah. Just while you're finding it, the other mention of Fu Manchu I always remember is Murray Rothbard. That's a different looking one.
Yeah.
Murray Rothbard just says like warmongers will always make out that they're, whoever it is they want to invade is plotting like Fu Manchu to conquer the world. Like, I think when he wrote it was Stalin, but he said the same with Hitler, as in they just project this. But obviously Fu Manchu, in that story, he really is trying to take over the world, right?
Yeah,
they portray their enemies as Fu Manchu when really they're actually much more like us,
One of the interesting things in the sort of origin story that Scheele wrote, that, as I say, Fu Manchu was kind of derived off his villain, Dr. Yen Hao. He says in the book, what was Dr. Yen Hao's aim? Simply told, it was to possess one white woman, ultimately and after all. He had also the subsidiary aim of doing an ill turn to all the other white women and men in the world.
Yeah, there is always the underlying element of they're just in it to get a white concubine, basically. Yeah.
Just about what you said, Pan. Sorry, Pedro, were you going to say something?
Sorry, no, go on.
Well, what you said about Hitler being sensitive about racial portrayals and how people are treated, for their race and stuff. Obviously, that's what you said fits with, the myth of Hitler snubbing Jesse Owens, whereas in reality, he apparently passed a compliment to Jesse Owens and said, like, yeah, he's a fine athlete. It was something like because Jesse Owens went to have his medal or something, and that would involve a waving to the people in the box, or to Hitler and stuff. But Hitler had to leave. Apparently, he sent a message or something for Jesse Owens saying, "Sorry, I had to go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have waved." Yeah.
I've read different accounts of it because one of the big problems with doing any kind of research into the actual actions of Hitler is that so much of it gets made up or slandered, or they just you have to sift through a lot of rubbish. I've read differing accounts, but he basically sent a congratulatory message to Jesse Owens afterwards, and by some accounts he sent him a watch or something, or some kind of token gift for his efforts. I have also read that there was a propaganda concern in that they again, this may not be true, but if Hitler did actively choose to leave to avoid meeting Jesse Owens, it was because Goebbels had a concern about the picture of Hitler shaking hands with a black man appearing in the German papers. They felt it just wouldn't come off quite right. But again, I don't know that that's the case. I think it's more likely that simply Hitler didn't have time to hang around the sports stadium.
Even Hitler was against the low IQ grugs.
He was.
There you
go. By the way, I was interested to know what the last Fu Manchu was. The last Fu Manchu film was in 1980. It was The Fiendish plot of Fu Manchu, starring Peter Sellers.
There
Do
you
you
go.
want to see? Do you want to see that one?
Yes, please.
This was the last. I guess they thought it was too like insensitive after this point, but it's kind of like a Shang Tsung version of the character. There you go. Look.
What have they done to the eyes?
So,
God.
That's the guy who played Inspector Clouseau, is that right? Or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all great. Boris Karloff, Christopher Lee, and Peter Sellers are all like all-time legendary actors.
Not to be confused with Peter Sallis, right?
No.
And it's kind of a shame, really, that that this part of their oeuvre is not
this
more
rich
fondly
vein
remembered.
of work.
There was sorry.
Apparently, there's a younger version of Sellers, I guess he ages in the film, because here he is looking much more like the Master from Doctor Who.
Doctor.
Yeah. Well, there must have been an attempt to revive this kind of stuff around the early 80s, because in 1981 they released a failed reboot of Charlie Chan where he was played by Peter Ustinov, which I've not seen it. I mean, I imagine it would be quite good for comedy value more than anything, watching Ustinov playing Charlie Chan. But yeah, they brought out a new Charlie Chan film around that time as well. So.
Peter Ustinov in his time was the most famous philosopher in the world, wasn't he? Does anyone get that reference? That's Alan Partridge. Alan Partridge is asked to name a more famous philosopher than Jacques Derrida, who he's never heard of. And his answer is Peter Ustinov.
That works.
I've been accused of looking like Peter Ustinov a few times. So anyway,
That's good.
Bit harsh, I think.
Okay. Peter Ustinov.
Panic also
I
spread
can't see
through
that.
America.
I know, but Peter Ustinov is about 30 stone as well.
He was a lot.
Anyway,
Yeah, you got a way to go before you get to Peter Ustinov.
America, especially the West Coast, where there were Chinese migrant workers. Novel after novel was published in both Britain and America with Chinese villains who were trying to destroy Western civilization. It culminated with the invention of a global villain.
So I'm really intrigued by this now, Hat. So are you saying that projections of Nazi racism were actually like American racism or British racism projected back onto them or something like that? That there was like a confluence between, I don't know, like KKK and what the Nazis were, or something like this, or
no, it was just that the Nazis saw themselves. They
racial theories of separateness.
Yeah, they just had a kind of slightly. It's almost like kind of proto third worldist bent in the early days, where you do read things in the propaganda and in various things written by various members of the Nazis that they always criticize British rule in South Africa, for example, because one thing Britain did was import lots of Chinese laborers to the mines just after they fought the Boer War, and this was seen because not only was that seen as being racially destructive to South Africa, but it was seen as being cruel to the Chinese and all the other ethnic groups because they were forcing wages down. There's a very interesting German film about British atrocity. It's about the potato famine in Ireland, which portrays the British as these kind of domineering colonial villains. There's a character who's this landlord, who he's the main villain of the film. He gets policemen and troops in to evict starving Irish families from land he owns because they're destitute, they can't pay his rent. And the character he looks a lot like Winston Churchill, like he's wearing a kind of John Bull outfit, but he's this kind of big fat man who clearly picked to look like Churchill because this was made during the war, I think, early days of the war. And there were sort of Nazi historiographies about the British Empire being this kind of very racist and it's this thing about cruelty. The idea that the Americans are cruel to the Native Americans, that they're cruel to the blacks, and it's not that the Germans have any particular love for any of these other races. They just have this whole concept of European colonialism being particularly cruel. I mean, maybe it was a response to them having lost their own colonial empire in the First World War. Maybe it was kind of jealousy over that, because I mean, let's not forget that the the Germans weren't exactly kind to the Hereros in Namibia. I mean,
It's kind of interesting though, because you can even see it in current politics. It's like the nastiness of MAGA that we've seen versus the kind of point of view that you get from Eric Stryker. These are kind of two different, and nobody would say that Eric Stryker's not racist because he fucking is, right? But he's got a different sensibility. I can kind of see it. Incidentally, by the way, isn't this Boris Karloff that we're looking at right here?
Yeah, this is the 32 film Mask of Fu Manchu.
Now I have to mention this because that Peter Sellers film, The Fiendish Plot of Fu Manchu, from 1980, one of the screenshots caught my eye. Peter Sellers in that film not only played Fu Manchu, but he also played the good guy character. As Peter Sellers did a lot, he often played 2 or 3 roles in a film, like he did in Dr. Strangelove, for example, right? But this caught my eye. Who do you spot smoking the cigar here? Who's that? But my all-time hero, David Tomlinson, Mr. Banks from Mary Poppins, right?
Wow.
This was the last film role of David Tomlinson before he retired. So I now have to watch this film, not only because we've talked about it, because it's his last ever film role. And he's
also people should realize that this panel actually is all sat in one room to record this, and this is actually a screenshot of us. This is what we look like.
That's AA in his fur collar there.
I am smoking a cigar, to be fair.
Sorry, but bow ties are a libertarian thing. So who's the other libertarian?
That's cultural appropriation.
That's Radlib in the background there.
It's me and Radlib. Yeah. There we go.
To Fu Manchu.
Also, sorry to have to. We're not getting very far. I just have to say this. Somebody in the chat is attacking Thomas Carlyle for laughing at the Irish all dying during the famine. Carlyle went to Ireland and wrote an account of the famine, and he was disgusted by it. He said Carlyle's whole point was that it was a failure of laissez-faire liberalism.
What would Thomas Carlyle have made of Goebbels' remarks about American racial politics? I wonder. Don't have to answer that. But,
the thing is, Carlyle is not
not cruel.
He's not a hateful racist. He's not kind of mean like that. And his view of the Irish is generally sympathetic, right? He talks about 30,000 distressed needlewomen, and he says, look at their abject condition. Why have they been put in this situation? Why have they had to leave their homes and come and live on these filthy streets of London? And it's down to the fact we've got absentee landlords. There's nobody steering the ship of state, etc. This wouldn't have happened if we had a wise government. That's his whole point. He's not like kind of not even like he's thunderous and he doesn't want the Irish there. He doesn't, he's not particularly. But even when he's talking about Haiti and things like that, he's got whole passages, doesn't he, Hat, where he says, look, we don't dislike the Negro. We don't dislike. He's actually a perfectly pleasant fellow to be around. We like his songs and his dances and all that sort of stuff. But it's just like we have to face some home truths about, that's
everyone
kind of his way.
Everyone kind of talks, everyone thinks of the meme essay about, the essay on the M word question. And of course, most people don't actually read it. They just assume it's some kind of, incredibly funny, hardcore racist tract. And it's like the point Carlyle makes whenever he talks about race, and especially in that notorious essay, is that all you have to do is treat people in accordance with their natural inbuilt character. He doesn't say you have to, his philosophy is that you would have to treat West Indian Negroes a different way than you treat laborers in, say, Sheffield. It's that they have different requirements, they have different outlooks, they have different views on the world and different work ethics. It's really, that's all he's saying, is that he was criticizing the British government for having abolished slavery, which, for all its flaws, it was a system of rigor and discipline in which the West Indian blacks were basically made to be productive and all kinds of other things, and they just replaced it with laissez-faire liberalism, because they had this universalist kind of Herbert Spencer type approach to things, or the kind of Mill approach. And he said, well, this is plainly stupid because, you know, a Russian Cossack and a Scotsman and a Haitian are not the same thing. You know, that different people need different lengths and breaches of order. It's just such a plain truth.
If anything, he would argue that some of the British workers needed a firmer hand, and that actually, you know, there are problems with becoming a masterless man, because it means that, you know, you get like that. There's also, I mean, one of the things he talks about is like, oh, well, look, you're going to abolish all of this, but what's going to be left? These pumpkin fields, you know, the crops are going to go to wreck and ruin. It's gonna, you know, it's going to turn to shit. And the thing is, I hate to say it, but you then fast forward 200 years, and every single thing he predicted came true. Every single thing he predicted came true. So,
well, I mean, look when he went to the reform prisons, and he said, well, this is pointless. You know, it's always the critique of the irrational ideological systems erected by liberalism, basically, in Carlyle's work. And as you say, right about everything.
Chu is described by his creator, a novelist called Sax Rohmer, as a yellow Satan, an archangel of evil who wants to take over the whole world and revenge himself on the white race.
The injection of the serum will make his brain mine. In other words, he becomes a reflection of my will. He will do as I command, exactly as though I were doing it. In the name of the British government...
Do you know, if we ever had like unlimited time, we should review all of the Fu Manchu movies.
I'm up for it. I'm up for it.
It's so much fun.
I demand the release of this boy. British government. I'll wipe them and the whole accursed white race off the face of the earth when I get the sword and mask who call the teeming millions of Asia to the uprising. This is only the beginning. I will wipe out your whole accursed white race.
I mean, fast forward a few years, it could have been Keir Starmer, couldn't it? Sorry for my low IQ bigotry chud humor there. I'm slowly weaning off. Okay.
May I add something just about the Goebbels thing? I'm still thinking about the Goebbels versus, you know, like Goebbels lamenting the.
This has troubled you, Horace.
I shouldn't have dropped this in so casually, should I?
Like Goebbels, like sadly watching the TV, listening to the radio, hearing the terrible treatment of blacks in the South. I imagine what happened, right, was more or less as soon as Hitler and co came to power, they were obviously denounced for their, you know, I mean, there were a few initial, there wasn't the Nuremberg laws, but there was an initial boycott. It was actually, I think, started by the stormtroopers, but there was, you know, a boycott of Jewish properties, I believe, quite early in Hitler's time as Chancellor. And there was at least a part of the American media and some others, British media and stuff, who were going to attack the Nazis as racists, right? It is expedient, if nothing else, for Goebbels, especially as Minister of Propaganda, to just play up everything that is at all equivalent in America, right?
Yeah.
But the American press are attacking us. We might as well mock them for how badly.
And so on. You know, Stalin did it as well. You know, the Russians, there was a huge part of their propaganda. Look how they
through the Cold.
Don't talk about us about human rights. Look how you're treating your black population. It's just such an easy gimme.
It is
for any enemies of America at that time. You know,
Horace, I'm sure you're probably well aware of this, but that infamous German Jewish goods boycott that they started was a retaliatory one. Because about a year prior, there was a famous headline. I think it was the New York Times. It said, "Judea declares war on Germany."
It wasn't a year prior. It was very brief. It was just almost immediately prior.
Almost immediately, right? Because they just millions of American Jews and some very prominent rich ones basically started an internal trade war on all German goods and all ethnic Germans. And this is a bit they never tell you. They never tell you that the boycott started by Hitler was basically a defensive one. It was like, well, they've done it to us. You know.
To me,
sorry, that's a perfect moment for me to plug my essay.
Go on, Horace. Yeah, go on.
Champions of Judea on my Substack is it's largely about that. And I would just add one little tidbit: the headline Judea declares war on America. It was in the Daily Express, Lord Beaverbrook's Daily Express, and I think Beaverbrook himself wrote the headline approvingly because he was in touch with the people who were starting that boycott, especially Samuel Untermeyer, but also Churchill was part of the same effort. But yeah. So Beaverbrook actually approved of it. He was saying, yes, the Judea's fighting, going after Germany.
Yeah.
For me, the one-shot book on this topic, just to truly understand what actually happened there, it is still is Unfinished Victory by Arthur Bryant. You have to read, I
just read that recently.
Truly understand Weimar, and I've double checked his stats and things. They all check, like, some of the stats in that book are quite unbelievable. But
and he's not.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't. He was a British historian. And what happened is when he realized what was going to happen, during World War II, and the tide of the war changed and all of that, he basically bought up every last copy himself and basically like took it off. He kind of self-imposed a ban on that book because he realized that what would happen if he was widely known for that book, essentially. So bit of arse covering by Arthur Bryant, but once you understand that during the period of hyperinflation after World War One, a third of the land and a third of the businesses were bought up from under the feet of the Germans because this group had excess capital from which they could get through easy liquidity from their international partners and things like that. Then you can then understand how some of this resentment starts. Just that one fact alone then starts to account for what happened there. And it starts to, and one of the things that comes out as it's not just that book. There's a lot of other books I've read as well. One of the parts of the narrative that we were told in school that never made sense to me was like, well, look, they came in power in 1933. By 1934, 1935, they've already brainwashed the entire population. I mean, like, what, are they magic? Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. And one of the things that comes across in Bryant's book, there's another book where this Australian guy went there in 1938 and did like a kind of on the ground report. Is he saying like they tapped into something that most Germans were feeling. They didn't need to brainwash the population. They were already really annoyed for a variety of different reasons. So, and that doesn't justify anything that went on, obviously, but it still kind of makes more sense than this happened for no reason at all, or just because they had hatred in their hearts or something like that. It kind of just makes sense of what happened, what went on there. And I think it's important that people get their history right, And in fact, there is a book that was written in 1980 from a more kind of critical point of view that repeats almost all the things that Bryant says and his sources say, repeats all those facts. I'm trying to remember, it was written by a female historian in 1980. All that stuff is there, not even a controversial book.
A Princeton, like a woman. Yeah, I know the one.
Yeah, you'll have come across it because when I was trying to, because what you always have to be aware of is, well, if there's facts, has that been made up? What's the source of it? But as far as I can tell, almost everything in that Bryant book is properly sourced. They kept decent records. He's got the receipts, he's got the names, he's got the amounts, he's got the percentages. And it is what it is. So
he was already credible as well. He was already a famous, like, established historian, right?
And in fact, I've got all of his other books here as well because he was known for writing British history, not German history. The
passage that you highlighted is the one that stuck with me. I read that book a month or two ago, and people have been telling me for years. It took me a long time to get around to it. But the passage about how much property was bought up, in non-German hands. I've not seen that in any other book. And like what you mentioned, that woman from the 80s, that book, I've read some passages from that. And again, she talks about who owned what in Berlin and also in the German media. It's like, it's actually complete control if you treat tribes as working together. It's like, and nobody else includes that in the history, even though it would only take a brief mention. It's not in your Niall Ferguson's. It's not in your.
It just automatically makes sense of what happened, though. Why there was a backlash, how there was support. You know,
there was a
need. It doesn't justify what happened later, but it does kind of at least account for. Because otherwise it just makes no sense. It's like, oh yeah, the Germans just went mad in the middle of the 1930s and elected this monster, and then became brainwashed in 1 year. That makes no sense as a narrative at all. So anyway, let's carry on.
And what these guys say of land ownership and media control is now true of politics in Britain and especially America, as in there's a monopoly, pretty much. Thomas Massey is doing very brave stuff, but there is near total control. And if people can't resist in the normal, peaceful ways, it gets dangerous, you know? Anyway, move on.
Well, those are all the arguments made at the time as well, but well, you know what happened. So anyway.
In the early 1990s, the Western democracies seemed to be the future. The collapse of the Soviet Union meant that their ideas were now going to spread all across the world.
Can you imagine Putin watching that sequence in 1996 or something? Oh, not Chechnya. Oh, not that. Oh, not Moscow. And then slowly but surely he's got it all back. It's kind of interesting. Apart from Ukraine, which he's in the process of doing.
But at home, in both Britain and America, there were still forces deep in the heart of both societies that had little to do with democracy.
Man with a gun!
Pause,
please.
Just going to answer brief questions in the chat there. It wasn't Romania. That was a succession of the sort of uprisings in the early 90s. The January events in Lithuania, what was called the Revolution on Granite in Ukraine, Black January in Azerbaijan, and that last bit was in Moscow. The chap was stealing flowers off the big statue of Lenin in Kaluga Square and chucking them away. So they weren't necessarily the most dramatic of uprisings, but they had this sort of surge of kind of populist rejection of communism.
My question was going to be: do you think those boys' objection to the statue was just the poor quality of the statuary? Because it was no Michelangelo, was it? I mean,
it's kind of like sort of Soviet realism kind of stuff. Sort of Lenin,
which is ironic. Because Michelangelo is actually much more realistic.
Well, their notion of it, it's sort of ideological realism, let's say, in their view.
This is the lesson of this footage that we're watching here, is that this is what happens when you allow the right deviation to go unchecked. That's basically that's the story of the Soviet Union. They allowed the right deviation to go unchecked, and now look what happened. Look what happened.
Works on a few levels, doesn't it?
Georgia 30, I need additional units, 6-7 in Dacre. I got a 415 man with a gun. He's running.
It seemed that despite all the changes of the past 30 years, that underneath the old structures of power and the corruption and the anger that created was still there.
Pause, please. just want to say to people who always joke about me saying, is this Aphex Twin? I know almost every Aphex Twin there is. I think this is Aphex Twin, I'm telling you. Right?
Hashtag number 4 from Selected Ambient Works, Volume 2. Yeah.
In Los Angeles in March 1991, Rodney King was chased and stopped by police.
Hitler and Goebbels just weeping at the racism here, Hat.
Those down low Southerners, you know. Although to be fair, one point in defense of the Southerners against anti-racist Hitler and Goebbels is just that I don't think Hitler and Goebbels ever had to live around African Americans, did they? You know, they were you know cushy European liberals on the other side of the world. They didn't have to live in Alabama or Louisiana, did they?
Bourgeois Goebbels.
You're an East Coast guy, right?
I'm an East Coast, yeah.
Where do Hitler and Goebbels stand on that? Do you reckon? I got Hitler as the West Coast.
I think Hitler would be West Coast. I think.
West
Hell.
I
think they'd both be absolutely horrified by rap. That's my honest view. But yeah.
Okay.
I mean, to be fair, they were very critical of like Negro, like negritude art and literature. Like they weren't especially keen on like African American. I think they considered it part of their degenerate art culture, and also I mean they were very against jazz because they viewed it as like primitive. They viewed it as like primitive Negro music.
It's obvious, Horus. They'd be into the Chicago scene. Their favorite would be Kanye West.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
No one man should have all that power. Okay.
For drunken driving. Despite offering no resistance, he was beaten repeatedly by 4 officers. It was videoed by a man watching from a balcony.
Pause again.
He took it to the police.
I know I've paused a hell of a lot, but this is deceitful from Curtis, or he's ignorant. I don't know, but like this video was edited. The guy didn't he? I mean, I haven't actually seen the full thing, but didn't Rodney King first lunge at the police, and then they did go way too far or something, right? But because this is Rodney King, right? Like it wasn't like he was high on PCP, I think, which makes you not feel pain. So you can literally be shot and keep trying to fight and stuff. So it just people just keep trying. Like James Brown apparently used to take it. He used to like destroy his car, all sorts. James Brown like was stopped while on PCP and was like dancing around and shuffling and doing a little show for the cops and stuff. But like you don't know what you're doing, you know. Like apparently Rodney King was a massive PCP head. And he attacked them, and the video starts when they've hit their first blow on him, and he's subdued. But obviously, they carry on too much. But, yeah.
Well, I have to ask you about because there is a school of thought which says that Return to Fresh Prince 90s kind of liberal world didn't actually exist,
correct,
and that if you look under Seinfeld and you know sort of Morgan Freeman, you basically get this. It's like, you know, race riots, race troubles, Koreans shooting the blacks, you know, trying to rob their stores type thing. You know, that really it's all a myth that they can't go back to that because it never was there.
Yeah, but Fresh Prince was a script. Fresh Prince was just people living inside their TV sets. And I'm not racist because I like Uncle Phil.
So you're saying that it just existed purely in the mind. People believed they were living in race trouble-free, multicultural world.
The vast majority of people who watch Fresh Prince of Bel-Air would have never even met a black person. It's just a nice way to say that, oh, well, I like Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff, and therefore I can't be racist.
Can I just briefly address comments in the chat about Curtis being dishonest, lying, Curtis, stuff like that? Just to remind, I mean, his job here isn't really to address contentious racial issues in what he's doing here. He's building up a sort of an idea about the atmosphere of violence that's being repressed that is coming out onto the surface. I mean, to be fair, his job isn't to kind of sort of debunk whatever manipulative editing happened with the Rodney King video. So.
Right, we're going to have to not pause it for like a minute at least, okay? Can you guys do that? Let's not pause.
No promises.
But no one was interested. So he gave the tape to a local TV station. When it was shown, there was an outburst of anger against the police violence. And 4 of the officers were put on trial. But they were all acquitted by an overwhelmingly white jury.
Due to the escalation of the situation and seriousness of the problems that are occurring, the sheriff has mobilized all department personnel.
For 6 days, thousands of people rose up and rioted across Los Angeles. It was only stopped when the National Guard and soldiers and Marines were brought onto the streets. It was an outpouring of the anger that had been simmering throughout the 1980s in the black community. But despite all the reforms and the changes in attitudes since the 1960s, nothing had really changed. It seemed that those in power in America were still deeply racist and would use violence against blacks in America to maintain that power.
It's been more than a minute, right?
Yeah, go on.
It's gagging.
So, like, it seemed. What did he say there? It seemed that white America was still terribly racist or whatever. Like, it seemed to who? Who's he? Simon, you're basically Curtis's sort of lackey here. So, whose perspective is he lionising there? Like,
I mean, I think if anything, he's trying to, again, I don't think he has the kind of space to do sidebars where he exonerates the LAPD to address the chap in the comments there. I think the point is it's a bit like Tony Blair. The perception is as important as the reality. Irrespective of what happened, I think he's saying that's what came across at the time. And that's what was conveyed as the media narrative, and then the media narrative has these consequences that flow on, these reactions and counter reactions. So I don't think again he's making a judgment about it. And he doesn't have the sort of the space to kind of go on as a debunking expedition.
do a blog about it after.
Yeah. I mean, you can do all that, but I mean, that's kind of not what he's doing anyway. He's looking at bigger sweeps and forces of history than just saying, oh well, that was something that people were wrong about, and I'm going to go and correct the record. I mean, other documentaries do that. It's kind of not what he's interested in.
I think on the question as to who Curtis is talking about when he says "so it seemed," I think he's part of that that increasingly vanishing world of the core of the kind of British intellectuals who see themselves very much as the conscience and the brain of the West. I mean, it sort of puts me in mind of like Will Self, Armando Iannucci, like these people who probably buy the papers and read every word, stay perfectly informed, buy all the latest books in Waterstones, this kind of thing. That kind of that not yet fully disillusioned group of intellectuals who basically set the tone in civil society for how we're supposed to see things. I mean, they would have
Curtis as well.
Yeah, those types of people. I mean, I imagine that to a man, they would have all viewed the Rodney King thing as, oh, shocking American racism. There's no other way they could have seen that through that prism at the time. I'd be interested to know what Curtis thought of George Floyd, actually, fentanyl Floyd.
Yeah. Pause. Just one more thing again. I just seen a comment come up there about sneering at Brexit and Trump. I don't know if that's aimed at Adam Curtis. I mean, I would say that's definitely not his position. His problem is actually with the reaction of the left, the people who did sneer at Brexit and Trump. And he said, he says, what are you thinking? If you're calling people stupid, you're going to lose them. This isn't the way to actually address the political current moment. So if that's about Curtis himself, I would decline that view. But if not,
one could adduce in favour of that comment. One could adduce the start of hypernormalisation. Do you remember he says, "Mad things keep happening." Trump, Brexit, something like that. It's not quite the right words, but it implies like this. I mean, I think you're right in the way that he's not owning all these views. He's relating them as what prevailed at the time or whatever.
He's observing the kind of the median consumer of the narrative, I suppose.
But when I watched hypernormalization for the first time, I began to think that is a really inappropriate way to do things. Obviously, this is another few years on, but because there is no consensus. If there ever was, there isn't now that Brexit is a mad thing. It's like, no, to me, that's a reversion to the default, And Trump is not a mad thing. It's what happens when you ignore this or you try and avoid, So it becomes more ridiculous. The more divided we become, the less that there's any consensus idea, as I say, if there ever was one. To act as though there is still one, to speak for it becomes more contentious, becomes more.
I've come full circle and now do see them as I now agree with I agree with after being through the whole arc of being anti the reaction, I have now come to see the error of my ways. I believe that in fact we have seen that lots of people are in fact stupid, and I don't know what to do about that at this moment in time. But I mean, to me, both of them increasingly look like they were some sort of operation. If anything comes out of the Epstein files, why was Peter Thiel and Jeffrey Epstein planning a greater tribalism for the West? Why were they plotting Brexit? Why were they, why were they for all these causes? Why are they stoking division through MAGA and things like this? So I've kind of come full circle and been like, well, yeah, people have legitimate concerns. Well, that does not mean that these people aren't charlatans, because they are. And I say this on the day that Reform have just launched a very interesting operation, which I'm seeing all up and down my timeline. So I'm like,
all the best people are involved in that, aren't they?
Yeah. So
we should at some point, not just you and I, but we all who have opinions on this, who are on, I don't know, the right or whatever we call ourselves, the sensible
sense left.
We all should have
Khmer Rouge.
We all need to have out this Brexit thing. We all need to have out this Brexit debate, because there's a lot of people now who maintain that we should still be in the EU, and I'm 100% against that.
I honestly think Brexit was an expression of we don't want immigration.
Yeah,
and it was hijacked by the elites for a more global Britain and blah 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 blah, and they still haven't dealt with it. And in fact, they then flooded the country with third worlders. So
I'm very much more in favour of European cooperation, including Britain, now than I was back then. I mean, I think just the things that have been revealed over the past 10 years, just make that the case, I think. But every single person on the right that I've kind of probed about this, just kind of casually, without really having said anything about it myself, I said, do you think maybe Brexit might have been a kind of maybe a mistake in the long run? And it's very, very against it. There's always, it's sort of like no matter how bad things have got now, it's sort of it was still the right thing to do. And I'm not criticizing that view. I just find it interesting that there's still kind of a strong core of no, that was absolutely correct at the time.
Now we're looking at the gurning face of this woman, Simon. We only got 14 minutes in due to the incessant stoppages, of which we are collectively responsible. The Politburo will take responsibility on a collective basis. Investigations will be held after the stream. We should do the super chats, because I know these chaps have a hard out in like 5 minutes. So
I'm good for another sort of 15 minutes or so.
But I know you've got a hard out, Horace. Is that right?
I need to go shortly. Yeah. Please.
Okay. So Principled Uncertainty says, I'm not trying to be cute, but could AA cover the dangers of AI? Okay, I mean, I'd need to get a guest on for that, because I don't know anything about AI personally.
Sorry. If there's a certain point that Simon wants us to get to today, I can stay for that. But I think he said 33 minutes originally. I don't. Think
no, we're not going to make it.
And I know I've stopped more than anyone today, but
that's on you, Comrade Molotov. Okay. Over Vivid says, I wrap all my hardback dust covers in acrylic. What sits you? Oh no, I just have mine covers out. If they come with a kind of protective case like the folios do, I keep them in that. But no, I kind of like the idea of my books slowly becoming more cigar scented over time and things like that. Realpolitik, because I'm never going to sell them. This is my personal library. Realpolitik says the miner with Street was Street's dad. Oh yeah, so the miner that you saw with Adrian Street was Adrian Street's dad at the start.
Right. Okay.
Eyes That Watch says some things never change. The E network was built on brass, wasn't it? Piotr says, I wonder whatever Curtis has to say about the Epstein files, Israel's lobby influence is not a theme in his work. Will he toe the BBC line that it was the Russians? I think he'll wait to see the entire narrative play out before touching it. That's my feeling. He often comes to things late, doesn't he?
Well, he takes the longer view because he's working kind of in periods of history where he's retrospectively looking at it. And his next big one, we anticipate, is probably going to be about America. And I think given what's happened and given the position we're in from where he'll be producing it, he'll have to address things after a manner. But obviously you're aware of the tripwires that exist on the BBC. You know, he's not going to deliver you Europa: The Last Battle, is he?
He'll never say it out loud, but you've got to notice that a huge amount of the people he covers happen to, have something in common. I'll just say that. Razor God says, did you watch any of the original Doctor Who growing up, AA? Any chances there might be a Doctor Who Deepest Lore at some point? My doctor was... what's his name with the question marks on him?
Sylvester McCoy.
McCoy. My doctor was Sylvester McCoy when I was a kid. Although I did go through a period of starting from the start, from the first Doctor. So I've seen all of the first Doctor episodes. And I also just, growing up, you see, what's his name? Tom Baker one, and the one where they're with the generals in the field. What's the third Doctor? I've seen quite a bit of that. In fact, I've seen a decent chunk of original Doctor Who. I'm not into it enough, I don't think, to do a Deepest Lore justice because people get very nerdy about Doctor Who. I'm more of a filthy casual when it comes to Doctor Who, and I am of the school that it was always a little bit shit, and that's part of its charm. Is that right?
Definitely.
I mean, I don't really like the new Doctor because it was too high budget. I think Doctor Who should have a papier-mâché alien and some bloke in a gorilla suit. And
classic period ended with Tom Baker. Really, I think some people might say Peter Davison, but yeah, it's completely wrong now.
Daleks that bump into door frames. Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Sensible Center says new iPhone is releasing on the 19th of February. I hear. Will AA crack? We have already made plans to go. Right. Imagine this, right? Both me and my missus need new iPhones. She says, why don't we go to John Lewis to buy them? I'm like, surely John Lewis is too expensive. Surely there's somebody somewhere cheaper to go and buy a new phone. Would you go to John Lewis to buy? Where do you go to buy a new phone?
John Lewis usually be a pretty competitive price, given the way they operate. If you are going to buy something high end, usually
there must be a cheaper place. Where do people go?
It's probably the same. It's probably not that different in all the major phone shops. I think you're getting pretty much the same deal wherever you go, because you're mainly paying for the hardware. Like there's not much commission.
How much are they? What am I looking at here? 400 quid?
Really?
£400 for an iPhone?
It's not an iPhone, but the last phone I had was like 110. It wasn't.
Oh, right. Somebody saying a grand? Someone saying a grand?
Yeah, but why would you buy an iPhone?
Do you mean like a new latest iPhone? Yeah, that'd be more than.
I've had the same phone since 2019.
Well, I don't see why anyone would buy an Apple product in this day and age. I mean, just why?
Get a nice Samsung S4 Mini like me.
Whatever's the new one, the iPhone 20 or whatever, buying it new, it's not been pre-owned. That will be more than £1,000 now. Yeah.
Oh, fucking hell! I'm not paying that.
Somebody in the chat says they bought a new iPhone yesterday for 1,200 quid.
Oh,
Why?
come on!
That's about right. Yeah.
What does it do that just a regular like Android smartphone can't do that you can get for about 100 quid? I don't understand it at all.
Just principle of the thing. I'm not paying 1,200 quid for a phone. Fuck off.
No, it's
You
ridiculous.
can lob it into a volcano and it flies back to your house.
See, I was injecting the. I was enjoying the AA abandons the phone arc that it was looking possible.
The LBC's broken me, Simon.
Yeah.
Nick Ferrari taking an hour of whether Prince Charles should give a speech about Mandelson, about Prince Andrew. I mean, fucking hell.
Yeah.
I've come to really loathe Nick Ferrari, by the way. I honestly, I almost pulled over this morning. I was so angry. He had somebody in from that immigration center who said, 15 to 20 Afghans are 15 to 20 times more likely to do a rape or a sexual offense than a British national. Okay. He then did the usual, not all thing. And then he immediately took a call from a guy calling in from Surrey. And the guy called in and said, the thing is, we could reduce immigration to 0. 75% of sexual crimes are committed by native Brits, and we could reduce immigration to 0, and it wouldn't cause any reduction in rapes. And I almost pulled the car over to be like, how does somebody listen to that stat and then come up with that talking point? It drives me crazy. Oh, it's driving me nuts.
See, it's Nick Ferrari that's your enemy, folks, not Adam Curtis. I can tell you that.
It truly is. Nick Ferrari is the worst because he stokes up anger in the audience, and then he Piers Morgans it. It drives me.
He's a domestic version of Piers Morgan for American viewers.
He's horrible. Fucking hate him.
I've always had a theory that that none of these shows actually do phone-ins. If you try to phone in, you won't get through. They've got a pre-scripted bank of actors who call in. Because have you noticed how every one of these shows, whether it's bloody Jeremy Vine or Nick Ferrari, they always manage to somehow have a narrative, even though it's meant to be random people calling in. There's always this perfectly managed roller coaster effect of takes. That to me, that's just not. You can't do that through random calls. Also, somebody in the chat, because I said I wouldn't buy a 1,200 quid iPhone, called me Pornamar Hat, POOR. Can I just say, right? I am actually quite wealthy, and the reason I will stay wealthy is because I don't spend 1,200 quid on a bloody iPhone.
I'm not. I want 1,200 quid all in for both phones. I'm not spending over £1,000 on something I've already got.
Yeah. That's to get the newest model, not pre-owned. I buy pre-owned phones because it's just half the price, and you lose nothing really. It still lasts long enough, you know.
But
sure. And so sure.
Sales coming back. Buy course. I need sell 10 courses to buy a fucking phone now.
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, I endorse what Panama Hat said there. The thing is, save money. This is, as he says, why rich people stay rich is you don't spend it on crap. Everything's bloody king's ransom these days. It's not a question of being mean. It's a question of ludicrous overinflation that we live with.
I mean, to be fair, that being said, every time I go into a cigar shop, it's about
priorities.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, the thing about an Apple iPhone is that they're not even built to last 5 years now. They're
friends of a
actively built
Banos, mate. Friends of a Banos. I can tell you 1,000 times. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
You must live a certain way.
You let the secret out now.
Oh, bollocks. Forget it. Bye, everyone. Zhang Zhui Menacing says Phil Jagielka is interested in appearing on your show. This guy has kept this in-joke going for years at this point, requesting Phil Jagielka to come on the channel. Puppy Sec says Nicolas Cage played Fu Manchu in one of the fake trailers in Tarantino's Grindhouse. I have to see. So, sorry for Nicolas Cage, Fu Manchu. Sorry.
That sounds like fun.
Okay, I have to.
By the way, Panama Hat, I think they do have callers ready to call in and just say something really bland and standard. I've witnessed that. I believe.
I'm sure they do. There's no way that the calls they get on those shows are just random people. Because let's face it, if it was, 90% of them would be, I'm fed up of all these bloody, round my way, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they definitely curate regular people.
Mm.
I better drop off. Thanks, everyone, and see you all next week. All right.
Cheers, Horace.
Well.
Not next week though. I'm away next week. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. 2 weeks time.
We're off.
I'll just be here anyway. All right.
There's Keir Starmer's police ready to turn up.
Yeah.
Okay. There's Nicolas Cage as Fu Manchu.
Wow.
Interesting.
Brudaham says it's very Iranian of AA to think the British shouldn't apologise for anything. I mean, why hasn't Iran apologized for anything? Iran should apologize for its treatment of various different peoples across its 4 empires in history. How about some apologies for the actions of the Qajars or the various households throughout 2,500 years of history? Nobody ever apologizes.
They should apologize for somehow managing to lose the Iran-Iraq war. That should have been
no. Hold on, they didn't lose. They didn't lose. It was a stalemate.
Yeah, but come on, they should have gone all the way to Baghdad, shouldn't they?
That was their mistake. They pushed on. They should have stopped. They repelled the attack, and then they were like, "All right, let's go all the way now." And that was their mistake. That was when
because we could have had the second Persian Empire, couldn't we, all the way through the Middle East? But no.
All right, I'm gonna have to do a bloody sale. I'm gonna do a flash sale. I am fuming about the cost of these bloody phones.
Bring back Mandy.
It seems in bad taste.
It does.
Yeah, but it would. But sometimes controversy can spur publicity. Also, just again, you don't have to buy a grand phone. You can buy a cheap.
I just resent spending the money.
You don't have to.
No.
That's the point we're making. You can buy like a less than 200 quid a totally workable quality smartphone.
Right. Use the discount code FLASH1. There's going to be only one available. If you use the code FLASH1, right? Use the code FLASH1, you'll get 50% off anything. So if you buy the mega bundle, you'll get 50% off that is the biggest discount I've ever given out on the channel.
You're coming back with an iPhone, aren't you? That's what this is about. You're so Gen X. You gotta chase.
Mate, I can't take LBC anymore, and I'm missing out on too many of my favorite racist podcasts.
But what we're saying is buy a cheap smartphone. It's all, you don't need to spend all the money on an Apple one.
But then, how long is it going to last? I've had this one for 6 straight years, and it's only just given up the ghost now. I could get the next one.
I think I've had my Android for longer.
Yeah, I've had this one for longer.
A lot longer. I mean,
a new iPhone won't last 5 years. They're built to break. The plug will go after about 2 years, probably, if that.
Come off the hamster wheel of Apple.
Yeah. I tell you what, if I get it, I won't install Twitter. I will only use it to listen to based books and my favorite racist shows. How about that?
And hopefully Keir Starmer will have banned it by then anyway, Twitter. So, look on that.
Yeah, hopefully Twitter will be banned by that point.
Yeah. Just a late recommendation from a viewer who was sent me a recommendation for a book on the Opium Wars. If you want a good book, it's called Imperial Twilight by Stephen R. Platt, The Opium War and the End of China's Last Golden Age. It's recommended to me by a loyal fan. Make of that what you will.
Hold on. The iPhone's not about a status. I just want something that works. Something that works that I can do all my stuff on. That I can keep my same phone number, my same SIM card, and just have a new phone.
But that's what Simon and I are trying to tell you, is that if you want a phone that works, you really shouldn't be buying one made by the Apple Corporation.
Yeah. As with competent government you seek, so it is with phones.
What's a good one now, then? What's a good one now?
We'll just buy any Android phone.
Samsung phones generally reliable.
Yeah.
They work differently. I've used to using this one for years now.
You want the Charlie Bighams of phones, don't you?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, but like, does it close on
Weird.
the other side, and you know,
Yeah.
you have to
No.
swipe left instead of swiping right, and all
You,
this
there are so many models to choose from. If you go into a phone shop, you can choose exactly the one you want that is functionally similar in every way to your old iPhone,
Oh,
and
I
it won't
hate
cost
it.
you $1,000.
I hate it. Oh, I'm gonna go live in the mountains.
Hmm.
The Brecon Beacons.
Gonna go and sit with the ghost of Goebbels, lamenting American racism, crying about Rodney King together.
Goebbels would have taken a knee for George Floyd. Just saying.
What goes on in this town is none of your business.
As long as I'm living here, it is.
Then maybe you shouldn't be living here!
Well, that's easily fixed.